The night was still, but the air atop the wall never truly stilled. It clawed and keened, whispering with the voice of the frozen north. Beyond the black stones, the white wastes of the haunted forest stretched away, pale and silent as death. Jon Snow stood upon the parapet, his hands curled tight on the cold stone, ghostly breath billowing before his lips. Dawn was a gray smear behind a field of clouds, and all the world felt suspended, waiting, tense, as though it too braced for something unspeakable. It had been a fortnight since the snows had begun to fall in earnest, heavy and relentless, burying the world beneath their white silence. The last crows returning from the ranging had brought with them word of worse things, wildling bands moving beneath the trees, half mad with hunger, fleeing the haunted dead who came on silent feet. Jon had sent out patrols, welcomed what stragglers he could, but the wall was stretched thin. Stannis Baratheon, their would-be king, had vanished into the snows with his ragged army, and the realm south of the wall seemed to have forgotten the Night's Watch entirely. It was then, standing in that frozen hush, that the horns sounded, once, twice, 3 times. Jon's heart lurched in his chest. 3 blasts, the dead. He ran along the parapet, boots sliding on the frosted stones, cloak snapping behind him like the wings of some great black bird. The men of the watch scrambled from their beds, armor half done, swords in trembling hands. Jon felt the thrum of fear in the air. Fear he tried to choke with command, his voice cold and cutting as the wind. "To the gate!" he shouted. "Bows, archers on the wall. Hold steady, damn you." The men formed ranks as best they could, quivers rattling, crossbows cranked and notched. Jon pushed through to the murder holes overlooking the outer yard, heart hammering, hand on the hilt of Longclaw. Ghost slunk at his side, fur bristling, red eyes gleaming in the gloom. The heavy gate groaned open. A figure strode from the forest's edge. No corpse, no white, but a woman, tall and red-robed, her hair unbound, gleaming like molten copper in the dawn. Melisandre, the Red Woman. Her eyes burned, uncanny and bright. Behind her, 2 forms dragged a litter through the snow, something swaddled in black and crimson. Jon's heart clenched with a foreboding that was not fear, but memory, a cold premonition that reached down into the marrow of his bones. "Open the gate," he commanded. The portcullis was raised, and Melisandre swept inside, the litter trailing. She walked unhurried, eyes fixed on Jon, mouth twisting into the faintest of smiles. "Lord Commander Snow," she intoned, voice smooth as silk. "It has been some time." Jon's voice was wary. "You were not expected, Lady Melisandre, and yet I am here. As is he, whom you thought forever lost." Her gaze flicked to the litter. The men of the watch stared, shifting uneasily, some making the sign of the 7, others pressing hands to black amulets, charms against the evil eye. Jon stepped forward. "Who is it you bring?" She gestured, and the 2 men, wildlings from their look, scarred and hollow-eyed, lowered the litter to the frostbitten ground. Melisandre bent, drawing aside the furs. The face beneath was pale, stubbled, eyes shut as though in a long sleep. His chest did not rise or fall, yet there was something unmistakable about the jaw, the brow, the long hair tangled in dark locks. Jon reeled, his breath caught. "Robb," he whispered. "Robb Stark." A murmur rippled through the watch. Ghost whined low, uncertain. Melisandre straightened, her red eyes never leaving Jon's. "Death need not be the end, Jon Snow. The Lord of Light gives, and the Lord of Light takes away. I found his spirit lingering, bound to this world by unfinished vows. With fire and faith, I have called him back." Jon stared at the still form, struggling to find words. You can't. Robb Stark is dead. He was slain at the Twins. I saw his head on a wolf's body." Melisandre's smile was thin, a spectacle meant to break men's hearts. "The body returned to me, broken, yes, but not beyond repair. I have done what must be done." Jon dropped to his knees beside the litter. Robb's flesh was cold, but not as cold as death ought to be. His lips, though pale, were not blue. The hair along his arms prickled. "Robb," he whispered. "It's me, John." For a moment, nothing. The red woman stepped close, murmuring words in a tongue John did not know. Fire flickered from her fingertips, casting dancing shadows across Robb's brow. Then the eyes fluttered, opened. Robb Stark stared up into the stormy sky, blank and lost. His lips parted, a thin gasp rattling from his throat. "Mother," he whispered. "Gray wind." John clasped his brother's hand. "Robb died. It's John. You're safe. You're at the wall." "Dantow." Robb's gaze focused. Recognition flickered, brief as lightning. Then pain crossed his face. A pain so deep, John thought it might drag him under, drown him in grief and memory. "John!" Robb's hand tightened on his. "How? Where am I?" John's voice broke. "You died, at the twins. But Melisandre, she brought you back." Robb's eyes went to the red woman. He flinched. Some memory surfacing, fear, loathing, awe, John could not tell. He tried to sit up, but the effort racked him, shuddering. "Don't," John said. "Rest. One. You've come a long way." And a crowd had gathered. Black brothers, wildlings, even a few of the free folk children gaping from behind their mothers' skirts. No one spoke. John could feel the weight of their eyes, the burden of expectation. Melisandre knelt beside Robb, laying a hand upon his brow. "The North has need of its king," she murmured. "Westeros is in chaos. The usurpers fight and squabble while the true threat gathers. You have returned to set things right." Robb's jaw clenched. "My mother? Catelyn?" "Dead," Melisandre said softly, "but not unavenged. You were wronged, Robb Stark. Betrayed. Will you rise to claim what was stolen?" "Nidar Orstewan." Robb's breath shuddered in his chest. His eyes went to John, pleading. "Where is Sansa? Arya? Bran?" John swallowed, the pain raw and old. "Sansa is in the Vale. Arya. No one knows. Bran and Rickon are lost, but Winterfell stands. The North remembers." The men of the Watch murmured, names spoken like prayers. Robb's shoulders straightened. The wolf was waking. Melisandre leaned close, her breath warm on his ear. "Swear to me, Robb Stark. Swear you will serve the Lord of Light. I will give you the strength to reclaim your crown." "Nadarma." Robb's eyes met hers, dark and full of storms. "I am of the North. The old gods are my gods." Melisandre smiled, untroubled. "You are of fire now as much as ice. The flames will burn in you, as they burn in Jon Snow." John frowned at that, but Robb's grip only tightened. "If I must take up my sword again, it will be for my family." "For the North." Melisandre dipped her head. "So be it." Robb struggled to his feet, swaying, but John supported him. The men fell back, uncertain, some making the sign of the horned moon, others staring as though at a ghost. Robb stood, swaying, wrapped in the battered cloak of the dead. His hair was streaked with silver, as though he'd aged a decade in the grave. But his eyes were alive, fierce and full of hunger. John watched him, heart torn in two. The days that followed were a fever dream. Robb recovering his strength, Melisandre tending him with strange brews and whispered prayers, the Watch whispering tales of miracles and wraiths in the cold dark. Some called Robb a demon, a firewhite like Beric Dondarrion. Others hailed him as a king reborn, come to save the North from its long night. John kept close watch on his brother, haunted by doubts. Robb was changed, quieter, sterner, prone to sudden silences. At night, John sometimes heard him pacing the tower, muttering to himself, as though fighting unseen foes. Still, each day Robb grew stronger. The color returned to his cheeks, the old fire to his voice. He took to walking the wall, speaking with the Black Brothers, learning their names. The men warmed to him. How could they not, when he listened, when he remembered, when he spoke to them not as a lord, but as a brother? John saw it, and felt the old ache, pride and envy, love and loss. He wanted Robb to succeed, but in his heart he knew what it meant. The North could not serve two kings. One evening, as the snows piled thick against the gate and the men gathered in the mess, Robb rose and called for silence. "My name is Robb Stark," he said, his voice carrying in the smoky hall. "Once I was king in the north, betrayed and slain by those I called friend. I have returned by fire and faith to reclaim my name and set right what was broken. The realm is torn. Baratheon, Lannister, Greyjoy, all squabble for the crown. But the north is not broken. We will rise again as we always have." The hall erupted in cheers, black brothers and wildlings both. Only Jon watched in silence, his face a mask. Later, Jon found Robb atop the wall, staring out into the endless white. "You've made them believe," Jon said. "But what about you?" Robb's breath plumed white. "I remember dying, Jon. I remember the fear. And I remember the betrayal. I won't forget it again." Jon's hands curled on the hilt of Longclaw. "The watch is sworn to the realm, not to any king. You can't ask them to follow you south." Robb turned, his gaze hard as flint. "I'm not asking. I will go south, alone if I must. But I'd have my brother by my side." Jon felt the pull. Love, duty, longing. "My place is here. I made my vows." Robb's jaw clenched. "Your vows kept you from your family, from Winterfell. I need you, Jon." Jon shook his head, voice quiet. "The north will follow you. The realm will flock to your banner. But not me, not yet." A silence fell. The wind howled across the wall, carrying with it the distant cry of wolves. Robb's eyes narrowed. "If you won't join me, then stand aside. I'll not fight you." Jon's voice was iron. "And if the north names me king, what then?" Robb's face twisted, grief and fury mingled. "Then we'll see whose claim is truest." The news spread, swift as rumor ever does. Robb Stark was alive. Robb Stark was marching south. Melisandre at his side, her red priests fanning out to gather followers. From White Harbor to Bear Island, ravens flew, some calling for banners, others warning of unnatural sorcery. Jon watched the realm wake, uneasy. Some lords sent fealty, their banners rising with the direwolf once more. Others balked, whispering of witchcraft. The veil held back. The riverlands trembled, torn between memory and fear. Sansa, hidden in the veil, received the word with disbelief. Arya, if she lived, was lost to all save the gods. Bran and Rickon remained phantoms, glimpsed only in half-remembered dreams. Jon could not rest. Each day, more men deserted the watch to join Robb's banner. The wall grew thinner, weaker. The nights grew colder. It was in the black hour before dawn that the last blow fell. A raven came from Winterfell. The North has named Jon Snow King. The words were simple, the import shattering. Jon read the letter by candlelight, his hand trembling. The lords of the North, Manderly, Glover, Mormont, Serwyn, had cast their lot with him. Not Robb, not the dead come walking, but Jon, who had bled for them, stood the wall, fought the long night. Jon looked up at the flame guttering in the dark. The old world was ending. Something new was rising. A world of fire and ice, loyalty and betrayal. And somewhere, Robb Stark was marching, sword in hand, the Red Woman's fire at his back. The crown was no longer a thing of gold, but of bone and blood. The war was coming. And this time, it would pit brother against brother. Robb's march south was not the thunderous host had once led, but a slow gathering of shadows and rumors. Those who saw him said he was changed, paler, older, eyes haunted by visions. But he spoke with the certainty of a man returned from the abyss. His followers were wildlings and outcasts, the dispossessed, those who had no place in Jon's north. Melisandre was always near, her eyes bright with secret fire. Some called her the true queen, the power behind the throne. Others whispered that Robb was her puppet, animated by sorcery. Yet none who looked on Robb could deny the wolf's blood. Something fierce and old, a force the snows could not quench. At White Harbor, Lord Manderly refused him entry. "You are not the king we named," he said from the battlements. Your time has passed, Robb Stark. The North is Jon Snow's. Robb rode away, jaw set, Melisandre murmuring in his ear. At Bear Island, Lady Lyanna Mormont received him with narrowed eyes. You are no ghost to frighten children, Robb Stark, but we are not yours. We stand for the living. At each holdfast, each keep, the story was the same. The North remembered Robb, mourned him, but would not turn from Jon. Bitterness gnawed at Robb. The fire in his veins burned, and with each day he grew more restless, more hungry. He spoke less, brooded more, haunted by dreams of wolves and flame. Yet not all doors were closed. In the shadows, old loyalties endured. The Karstarks rode to his banner, grim and silent. The Umbers sent men, grizzled and wild. Free folk drifted south, drawn by stories of the Wolf King reborn. Robb's army swelled, ragged, desperate but fierce. The banners of the Old North flew again, if fewer than before. Winterfell loomed before him at last, gray and timeless, crowned with snow. Fires burned in its windows, watchful eyes on every parapet. Jon waited within, the king the North had chosen. The time for brothers to speak as brothers was ending. Jon watched the torches flicker beyond the walls, a silent sea of faces in the snow. He stood in the godswood, the heart tree's red eyes watching, ghost pacing at his side. The words of the old god seemed thick in the air, heavy with meaning. Sansa stood beside him, cloaked in white, her face grave. She had returned from the Vale at his summons, her voice lending strength to his claim. The North needed a Stark, and Jon, half wolf, half snow, was what they had. He was my brother, Jon said, voice raw. One? Sansa's eyes glittered. He is still your brother. That makes him more dangerous, not less. Jon nodded, feeling the truth of it. Robb knew the North as Jon did. Knew its roads, its people, its secrets. But Robb was not the boy he'd once loved, and Jon was not the boy he'd once followed. The horns sounded from the gate, Robb's envoy. Jon donned his cloak, long claw at his hip. Sansa squeezed his hand, her touch cold but steady. The great hall was packed. Lords and men-at-arms pressed shoulder to shoulder, the banners of House Stark and the direwolf flanking the dais. Jon sat the high seat, ghost sprawled at his feet. The doors opened. Robb entered, tall and straight, Melisandre at his side. He looked thinner than Jon remembered, haunted. But the wolf's eyes burned in his skull. They stood before the dais, and all the North watched. Robb's voice was steady. Jon Snow. By rights of blood I am Robb Stark, firstborn of Eddard and Catelyn Stark. I claim Winterfell, and the crown of the North. Step aside, and I will forgive those who wronged me. Jon's answer was quiet, but it rang through the hall. You were my brother. I loved you. But the North has chosen me. I cannot yield. Robb's jaw clenched. If you will not bend, you will break. A murmur rippled through the hall. The old lords remembered the Red Wedding. They remembered broken oaths, and the price of pride. Jon met Robb's eyes. We are both Starks. We both love the North. There must be another way. Melisandre's voice slid between them, silken as poison. There is only fire and blood, Jon Snow. The old world is dying. The new world is forged in flame. Robb's voice was a blade. Then let the gods decide. The hall fell silent. The heart tree watched, and the war between brothers began. The armies did not clash that night, nor the next. Winter fell thick upon the land. Smothering sound and movement. Skirmishes flared in the woods, wildlings against Northmen, shadows against ghosts. Men whispered of omens, direwolves fighting beneath the moon. The Red Woman seen walking the battlements at midnight. Jon and Robb did not meet again. Letters passed between their camps, words edged in sorrow and steel. Neither would yield. In the end, it was the men who decided. Some deserted Robb, unable to stomach war against their own blood. Others deserted Jon, lured by the promise of the old king's return. Melisandre walked among Robb. Melisandre walked among Robb's followers by night, her presence unearthly in the shifting glow of the campfires. The snow muffled all sound, so her words, always quiet, always precise, seemed to carry with unnatural clarity. She spoke of sacrifice and destiny, of fire and shadow. She did not beguile the hard men of the north with lies, but with promises. The promise that death could be overturned, that those who stood with Robb Stark now stood with something older than kingship, with fate itself. Some believed and looked upon Robb with hope and terror. Others watched her with the suspicion men grant witches and prophets. But even they could not deny that Robb, the dead king, walked and breathed and wept as they did. Robb felt it in himself too, the way his own flesh rebelled against the world. Every night his dreams were tangled. Catelyn's face behind a watery veil, his father's silence, the howl of wolves circling in a blizzard. Sometimes he awoke and looked at his own hands, half expecting the skin to slough away and reveal nothing but fire and ash beneath. He kept those fears to himself. By day, he wore the old mask, the lord, the commander, the North's prodigal king. He let the men see the wolf, not the cracks beneath the fur. On the fourth morning, the snow eased. The skies cleared, blue and brittle as glass. Scouting parties met in the frozen woods. A skirmish only. Arrows exchanged, blood staining the ice. A dozen men fell, most of them Robb's. Jon heard the reports in silence, then sent out another patrol, always with orders not to pursue, not to escalate. But restraint is a brittle shield. Each night more men crept away from Jon's camp, some to join Robb, some to vanish into the wild. Robb sent Jon a letter. The ink hurried, the words scrawled as though by a man whose hand trembled. You are my brother. I do not wish to shed your blood, nor see more Northmen slain for pride. I beg you, meet me once, face to face, without banners, without swords. Let us speak before all is lost. Jon read the letter 3 times before he answered. He did not show it to Sansa, though he saw her eyes on him that evening, keen and knowing. When at last he replied, his own words were curt, but not unkind. I will meet you by the God's Wood at dawn. Come alone. I swear by our father's grave no harm will come to you. The appointed morning came, windless and deathly cold, the air itself crackling with a tension that set teeth on edge. Jon rose early, donning only a black cloak, long claw at his hip, but sheathed. He crossed Winterfell's yard in silence, ghosts padding behind him, first silver in the blue light. The guards at the gate saluted, but said nothing. None would speak against this meeting, not after all that had been lost already. The Godswood was still. The heart tree waited, ancient and impassive, its face weeping red. Jon arrived first. He knelt at the roots, feeling the eyes of the old gods upon him. Ghost settled at his side. Robb appeared a few moments later, as if conjured by the wind itself. No escort, no armor, only the battered wolfskin cloak around his shoulders, the Stark's sword at his side. The brothers regarded each other, uncertain. For a long time neither spoke. It was Robb who broke the silence. I never thought I'd see you here, at Winterfell, on the high seat. Did you ever dream of it when we were boys? Jon looked at him, looked and truly saw him. Not just as the returned king, the harbinger, the symbol, but as the brother he had once adored. Robb's hair was streaked with gray, his cheeks hollow. Something in his eyes burned, but it was not the old boyish fire. I dreamed of home sometimes, Jon said, quiet, but never of crowns, never of war. Robb nodded, the hint of a sad smile playing at his lips. I wanted to make you a Stark, to give you a place. Father forbade it. I thought I was wise once following his word. Now I wonder if all our wisdom was only pride by another name. Then, Jon shook his head. We're not boys anymore. And the world is changed. Father is dead. Mother too. Rickon and Bran are lost. Arya gone. Sansa is the last of us who has seen both sides of the wall. Robb's eyes flashed at that, pain and jealousy mingling. I was king once. They called me the young wolf. I led armies, I won battles. but it wasn't enough. I trusted the wrong men. I believed in honor where there was only ambition. Jon studied him. You died, Robb. They killed you. And yet you're here. Now. Robb's mouth tightened. Melisandre brought me back. I don't know if I thank her for it. I remember dying. I remember pain, cold darkness. I remember nothing. And then fire. I came back wrong, Jon. I feel it every day. The men, some of them think I'm a monster. Others think I'm a sign. Jon's voice was gentle. What do you think you are? Robb looked at his hands. I think I'm a man with a second chance, a king with no crown, and a brother with nothing left to lose. Jon swallowed, the cold biting deeper than ever. The North chose me. Not because I asked for it, because I stayed when all the rest were gone. I fought for them. I bled for them. But you're the true-born son, the rightful king. Me. A sharp breath from Robb. Do you want the crown, Jon? Jon shook his head, slow and certain. No, I never did. But I cannot abandon these people. Not now. They need a Stark. Robb took a step closer. The old closeness lingered between them. Ake and longing and loss. Then let us be Starks together. No more fighting. No more blood. You keep Winterfell. Let me go south. Let me fight the Lannisters, the Boltons, all the rest. Let me be your sword, not your rival. Nanny Dandai. The horror. Jon met his gaze, searching. And Melisandre. Robb hesitated. She follows me. She says I have a destiny. I don't know what I believe, Jon. But I know I will not be her puppet. I am my own man, for as long as I have breath. Jon looked away, eyes on the face carved into the heart tree. The North will never trust her. The North fears her. She's brought back you, but she's burned others. Innocent men, children. Robb's jaw worked. I can't undo what's been done. But I can promise you this. No more burning. No more sacrifices. If I go south, it will be as a Stark, not as her champion. Damn. A silence stretched between them. The wind rustled the branches overhead. Ghost whined low, pressing against Jon's knee. Jon sighed. I will send word to the lords. We'll hold a council. Let them see you. Let them decide. Robb nodded. I will abide by their choice. And if they do not want me, I'll go. No more blood. No more Northmen dying for me. Jon reached out, clasping Robb's shoulder. The old warmth flickered between them. Brother. Robb's grip was strong, desperate. Brother. Whatever comes. Nimder. They stood together beneath the heart tree, two sons of Eddard Stark, one born of ice, the other reborn in fire. For the first time in weeks, Jon felt hope stir in his chest. But hope in the North is a fragile thing. By nightfall, the wind was howling again, and Melisandre watched from the ramparts, her red eyes full of secrets. The council convened in Winterfell's great hall. All the North's remaining lords gathered in a circle of fire and shadow. Some were old, some young, all hardened by war and grief. Sansa stood at Jon's right, her voice calm and cold. Melisandre stood behind Robb, silent and enigmatic. Robb addressed them, not as a king demanding fealty, but as a son returning home. He spoke of loss, of Grey Wind, of Catelyn, of all the North had suffered. He spoke of the battles he'd won, and the trust he'd lost. He did not hide his death, nor the manner of his return. The fire brought me back, but I am still of the North, he said, voice trembling. If you have me, I will serve you. If you fear me, I will go. A long silence followed. It was Lady Mormont, fierce and small, who stood first. We remember Robb Stark. We remember his justice. But we also remember the Red Wedding. We lost brothers and sons. The North needs peace, not ghosts. Jon Snow has been our shield. Let him be our sword. And others followed. Lord Glover, grim and stern. "We bled for you once, Robb. We bled again for Jon, but we cannot follow both. We must have one king." Robb listened, face composed but eyes storming. At last he bowed his head. "I hear you. The North is Jon's. I will not fight my kin." The council broke, lords departing in silence, the fire guttering low. Jon caught Robb in the darkness, his voice full of pain and gratitude. "Thank you." Robb smiled, hollow but honest. "It's not a crown I want anymore. Only a place, only peace." But Melisandre was waiting in the shadows, her gaze hot enough to scorch the snow. She drew Robb aside, her voice low, her words fierce. "They are wrong, these lords. They do not see what I see. You are the prince that was promised. The North is blinded by fear. The realm south is ripe for the taking. Claim it, fulfill your destiny." Robb shook his head. "No more fire, lady. No more blood for your god. My family comes first." Melisandre's eyes narrowed, her lips parting in a hiss. "The others are coming. Stark. The long night falls. The fire in your veins is all that can withstand the darkness. If you will not lead, you will follow." He stepped away from her, leaving her alone with her flames. He did not see the way her gaze lingered on Jon's snow, measuring, calculating. Snow fell for 3 days and nights, sealing Winterfell in a cocoon of silence. During that time, Robb kept to himself, wandering the battlements, staring out into the endless white. He spoke little, even to Jon, but he did not leave. On the 4th morning, a rider arrived from the south, dusty, half-frozen, breathless. He brought tidings from the Riverlands, chaos. Riverrun under siege. Lannister and Frey banners at the gates. The remnants of the Stark loyalists penned within, desperate for aid. Jon gathered his council, Robb at his side. "The Riverlands were once ours," Jon said, voice steady. "But the North is not strong enough to march south. If we leave, Winterfell may fall. If we stay, our kin in the south are lost." Robb spoke, his voice iron. "Let me go. Let me rally what men I can. I know the Riverlands. The people there remember me. They will fight for a Stark, even a ghost." "Man," Jon frowned. "It's a trap. The Lannisters and Freys want you dead, again. You'd be walking into their jaws." Robb's eyes burned. "Let them try. I have no fear of death, not anymore." Sansa spoke softly. "If you go with Winterfell's blessing, but take no Northmen who do not choose you freely. The North cannot bleed for the South again." Robb nodded. "I will ride at dawn. Only volunteers. Only those who remember." Jon clasped Robb's arm, fierce. "Come back. The North is not whole without you." "Melisandre." Robb smiled, and for a moment Jon saw the boy he'd once known. "I always come back. That is my curse, it seems." That night, Melisandre came to Robb's chamber, red flames dancing on her sleeves. "Do not fear, Wolf. Fire will protect you. Death cannot claim you twice. Not while I watch." Robb's answer was flat. "Do not follow me. Not this time." Melisandre only smiled, her shadow flickering long against the stones. "You cannot cast off fire, Robb Stark. You are fire now." "You?" Robb left Winterfell with a handful of loyal men. Old retainers, wildlings who owed him their lives, outcasts and broken men. As he rode beneath the gate, Jon watched, heart heavy, Sansa at his side. Ghost loped behind Robb's horse for a dozen yards, then stopped, watching his master vanish into the snow. Winterfell seemed emptier, colder, after Robb's departure. Jon threw himself into the work of ruling, settling disputes, shoring up the walls, preparing for the winter to deepen. Sansa was his right hand, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued. The lords deferred to him now, but Jon felt the loss of his brother like a wound that would not heal. Word came from the south, slow and scattered. Robb had reached Riverrun, rallying the desperate defenders. Frey outposts fell, Lannister scouts vanished in the night. Tales spread of a white wolf among the reeds, of a Stark who could not be slain. Fear grew in the hearts of the Lannisters and their allies. Some said the young wolf had become a spirit, a legend, impossible to kill. But the rumors grew darker too. At night, men in Robb's camp spoke of strange fires burning, of Melisandre appearing at the fringes of the host. Some swore they saw Robb walking the battlements after midnight, his eyes aflame, his wounds leaking red and gold light. Jon read the reports and felt the weight of prophecy pressing on him. He remembered Melisandre's words of fire and blood, of kings made by sacrifice. He feared for Robb, feared for all of them. Then, one bitter night, the ravens brought worse news. The others had breached the wall at Eastwatch. Winter was here. The true enemy had come. Jon sent word to Robb, to every lord, every ally. The North must unite or all would perish. There was no time left for old wounds. There was only war. And as the snows fell and the night deepened, the two brothers, one of ice, one of fire, prepared to meet the darkness, together or apart. Their choices would shape the fate of Westeros. And in the end, only the old gods and the new would know whose crown was truest. K.K. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941E. 1655. 159/19 lax A. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 E300 N72F Satan 25. Lax. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 860 Fortninity 878 Bangni. Snow fell thick across the north, blurring all edges and muffling the clamor of Winterfell's crowded halls. Days blended in a haze of white and gray. Jon Snow stood before the hearth in the great hall, watching the embers shift and settle, his thoughts drifting as restlessly as the storm outside. Ghost lay curled at his feet, the direwolf's flank rising and falling with each breath, a silent sentinel even in slumber. The arrival of dawn was signaled only by a pale light filtering through the high windows. The news of Eastwatch's fall still burned in Jon's mind. He had sent ravens, sent scouts, sent every word he could muster to the lords of the north and beyond. War was not a possibility, it was the present. And for all his strength, Jon felt smaller than ever beneath its shadow. A soft step on stone announced Sansa's approach. She was cloaked in gray wool, her hair woven and pinned, her face pale but determined. She joined him at the fire, eyes following his into the flames. "You have not slept," she said. Jon managed a wry smile. "Nor have you." They stood together in silence, the heat from the hearth, their only shield against the cold beyond. Sansa spoke first. "Have you heard from Robb?" Jon shook his head. "Nothing since River Run, only rumors." Sansa's hands twisted together. "He cannot do this alone. None of us can." "You must go to him, Jon." He turned, studying her profile. "And leave Winterfell. The lords will follow you," Sansa said. "The people will trust you. But they trust Robb as well. If there is any hope at all, it is in you, standing together." "No." Jon thought of the banners in the snow, the haunted faces of the Northmen, the tired voices of those who called him king. "If I go, you must stay. Hold the north, rule in my stead." Sansa's lips tightened, but she nodded. "I will do my duty, Jon, as you will do yours." Jon reached out, squeezing her hand. In that moment, brother and sister, each saw the other's burden and shouldered a piece of it. By midday, Jon had made his choice. The council grumbled, but did not protest. Sansa's word was enough, and the memory of Robb's return still lingered. Half hope, half fear, in every conversation. Jon departed Winterfell with a host of hard riders, Ghost at his side, the direwolf's breath a white ghost in the wind. They rode south, through forests bent low beneath ice, across rivers rimed with frost. The north was dying by degrees, the land silent, empty, the very air wary. Days later, a half-frozen scout found them by moonlight and brought tidings from the riverlands. Robb's host had broken the siege of River Run, scattering Freys and Lannisters, the banners of the wolf once more flying above the water tower. But it had not been victory without cost. The men whispered of flames at midnight, of wights among the reeds, of Melisandre's red shadow passing in and out of Robb's tent. The stories multiplied and changed, but one thing did not. Robb Stark was alive, and he called for his brother. Jon rode on. The closer he came to the Riverlands, the more the land changed. Trees more sparse. The ground turned to mud. The villages burned and abandoned. At last, he reached the outskirts of River Run. The banners hung limp in the mist, gray direwolves, the trout of Tully, the black and gold of Baratheon. Campfires burned low, and men moved like shadows, gaunt and wary. Jon was led to Robb's tent by a squire, the young man's eyes wide with awe. Inside, the tent was spare, a campaign map, a battered writing desk, a small brazier smoking in the gloom. Robb sat hunched over a letter, his face in shadow, hair grown long and wild. The years in the grave had aged him, but he stood the moment Jon entered, crossing the space in 3 strides. "Jon," Robb said, and his voice cracked on the word. "Robb." Jon let himself be pulled into a rough embrace, the 2 brothers holding fast, the world momentarily forgotten. Ghost brushed past, sniffing at Robb's boots, then at the tent walls, before settling at the edge, red eyes fixed on the door. They stood together, the hush broken only by the pop of coals. When they separated, Jon saw the lines in Robb's face, the hollow hunger in his eyes. "You look tired," Jon said softly. Robb's smile was weary. "So do you." They sat together, Jon strapping his sword, Robb pouring rough wine into battered cups. They drank, and for a moment it was almost as it had been at Winterfell. Before crowns, before betrayals, before war. "I heard you broke the siege," Jon said at last. Robb nodded. "They fled at night, left the wounded behind. The Freys, the Lannisters, they fear me now. But it's not enough. The dead are moving, Jon. I've seen them. More than ever before. Dozens, hundreds. They rise from the rivers, from the earth. Some nights I wake and feel them near, just beyond the firelight. Nay." Jon drank deeply. "Eastwatch has fallen. The wall is breached. We have little time." Robb's eyes flickered. "We must stand together then. There's no other way." Jon met his gaze. "Will the Riverlands march with us?" "Most will." Robb's hand closed tight around his cup. "But they're afraid. They fear the dead, yes. But they fear me, too. And Melisandre, they whisper that I've come back wrong." Jon thought of Melisandre, her watchful eyes, the firelight dancing in her hair. "What do you want, Robb?" Robb's lips thinned. "To fight. To end this. I don't care about crowns anymore. If the North wants you, so be it. I'll be your sword, your shield. But I won't bend the knee to her gods. Not for fire, not for prophecy." Jon reached across the table, grasping his brother's arm. "We fight together. That's all that matters." A quiet knock at the tent. Jon's hand went to his sword by habit, but Robb only nodded, and the flap was drawn aside. Melisandre entered, silent as a shadow, her red robe immaculate despite the mud outside. She inclined her head. Jon Snow, the wolf and the wolf, reunited at last. Then Jon regarded her coolly. "The wall has fallen. If you have any prophecies left to give, now is the time." Her smile was thin. "The long night is upon us. Fire and ice must stand together, or all will be lost." Robb stiffened. "We don't have time for riddles. The dead are coming. The living must march." Melisandre's gaze lingered on both brothers. "The Lord of Light has shown me 2 wolves standing before the gates of darkness. One crowned by the cold, the other by flame. Only together can they turn the tide." Jon stilled. "Is that why you brought him back?" She did not answer directly. "I serve the light, not any king. But I do what must be done. Robb stood. Enough. Jon and I will lead the armies north. The Riverlords will follow. If you want to help us, light the way. Otherwise, stay out of our path. Melisandre inclined her head and retreated, the air in the tent warming as if she had taken some of the cold with her. After she was gone, Jon studied Robb. Do you trust her? Robb shook his head. No, but I trust you. Jon smiled, a little grimly. We'll need more than trust to win this war. They spent the night plotting, rallying banners, dividing supplies, mapping the fastest roads north. Messages were sent by riders and ravens, some to Winterfell, others to the crumbling watchposts, still more to the Vale and the Stormlands. Jon insisted that any lord, great or small, who could muster men must do so and meet the Starks in the fields south of Winterfell. The days that followed were a blur of preparation. Northmen from scattered holdfasts rode in, battered and grim. Riverlords gathered their retainers, mending spears and fitting arrows. Men whispered of dragons, of sorcery, of ghosts in the snow. The air was charged with fear and anticipation. On the seventh day, the hosts set out, 2,000 strong all told, banners snapping in the wind. Robb and Jon rode at the front, ghosts pacing alongside, Melisandre somewhere in the rear, the red priests she had summoned burning strange fires each night. The men eyed the flames warily, but none dared protest. They made their way north, the land growing colder, the sky grayer with each mile. The remnants of the wall loomed ahead, a broken monument against the horizon. Refugees from Eastwatch clustered in ruined towers, some half-mad with fear. They spoke of wights with blue eyes, of giants made of ice, of cold that bit through armor and flesh alike. Jon called a council that night by firelight. The greatest of their allies gathered. Lord Manderly, old and canny. Lyanna Mormont, fierce-eyed. A handful of wildlings, and Robb, pale as a specter but unyielding. Jon addressed them, his voice steady. We cannot hold the wall. We must fall back to Winterfell. Every hand must be armed. Every man and woman ready to fight. Yeah. Robb added his voice, deeper, more certain. I know fear. I have died, and yet I stand. If we break now, all we love is lost. We hold at Winterfell. We fight for dawn. Lord Manderly spoke first. Winterfell is strong, but food is scarce. We can hold a siege for weeks, not months. Lyanna Mormont's voice cut through the muttering. We hold as long as we must. The dead do not rest. Wildling voices joined. We fought them beyond the wall. But there are more now. More every night. Delor. Jon listened, weighing every word, the weight of command heavier than any crown. He remembered Maester Aemon's words. Kill the boy. Let the man be born. He rose, meeting every gaze. This is the end of the world we knew. But it is not the end of us. I will stand with you, my brother beside me. Not as king, but as the sword in your hand, for the living. The council dissolved, grim and determined. Jon and Robb lingered by the fire, planning the last details. Do you regret it? Robb asked quietly, eyes on the flames. Taking the crown? Jon shook his head. I never took it. It was given to me. I would give it back if I could. Robb's lips curved, bittersweet. Perhaps, in the next life, we'll have peace. Jon squeezed his shoulder. Let's make sure there is a next life first. The march resumed at dawn. The host fell back to Winterfell, fortifying the walls, sharpening blades, rationing every crumb of bread. Sansa worked tirelessly, organizing the kitchens, keeping the children fed, rallying the frightened. Davos returned with ships, ferrying more survivors from White Harbor. Gendry hammered blades in the forge. Arya appeared in the yard at dusk, silent and deadly, having crossed half the world to fight at her brother's side. The dead came on the third night, white shadows in the trees, eyes glowing blue, a wind that howled of despair. The battle was chaos, screams, steel, the thunder of giants, the shriek of wights. Jon and Robb fought together at the gate, Ghost tearing through the dead, Arya slipping through shadows to strike at their backs. Melisandre appeared atop the walls, her voice rising in song, the flames on the ramparts answering her. For a moment, the dead fell back, hissing, the fires blazing so hot that snow melted on the stones. Jon's sword met Robb's side by side, not in battle against each other, but against the night itself. The men who saw them said it was like watching legends come alive. Two wolves, fire and ice, brothers made whole for the first and perhaps last time. As dawn crested, the dead faltered. Those who remained living wept, clutching each other in the blood-streaked snow. The sky above Winterfell turned pink, and for the first time in weeks, the sun broke through. In the days that followed, the survivors counted their dead and mended their wounds. Robb and Jon walked the battlements, silent and unbowed. No one spoke of crowns. The North had no need of them. In the quiet after the storm, Jon met Robb by the heart tree, the ancient face scarred by the night's battle. "We lived," Jon said softly. Robb nodded. For now, Jon's gaze was heavy with sorrow and hope. "If we must fight again, we fight together." Robb smiled, and for the first time since his return, the fire in his eyes was gentle. "Together. Always." The North remembered, and so did its wolves. Inmained. Eastportland. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 EXE-6, 329 Bine. Ineandasadi. Winter's heart gripped the world, and though the dawn had burned away the shadow of death from Winterfell's walls, the snow kept falling, relentless, as if to remind all living things that even the memory of warmth was fleeting. The dead had been pushed back, not destroyed. Scouts returned each day with tales of restless wights wandering the ruined fields and forests, and more than one frozen corpse was found with blue eyes still faintly glowing, refusing to yield to the coming of the sun. Within Winterfell, the survivors clung together. Men who had ridden behind the banners of Stannis and Roose, lords who had knelt for Lannister or Stark, wildlings who had never seen a wall before. All were now bound by necessity, by hunger, and by the memory of the cold tide that nearly drowned them all. The days passed in fevered work, walls rebuilt, new fires set. Every scrap of food and leather and hope counted and rationed. Jon Snow and Robb Stark were everywhere, not kings above their people but among them, hauling stones, carrying wounded, walking the rounds in darkness with nothing but a blade and a whispered word of comfort. There was no talk of crowns in those days, nor of gods. Melisandre kept to the shadows, her red priests and priestesses tending the dying, stoking their own fires, watching the sky for signs. Some feared her, others clung to her words. She never sought the halls of power. Instead, she spoke to the broken and the lost, urging them to hold fast to hope, to light, to whatever faith could be found in a world so scarred by shadow. In the chill before dawn, Jon found Arya waiting at the Godswood, eyes sharp, her hair wild in the wind. She had returned as suddenly as she had left, a shadow from the east, and now moved about the castle as if she had never left its walls. She greeted Jon with a rare smile, softer, less haunted than the one she wore for others. "You still carry needle?" Jon asked. Arya patted her hip. "And other things." He laughed quietly, the sound surprising them both. "I never thought we'd see this day. You, Robb, Sansa. Almost as if we were back in Father's Hall." Arya's eyes darkened, and she glanced to the heart tree. "Nothing will ever be the same. You know that." "I do," Jon said, turning to trace the old faces in the weirwood's bark. "But for a moment, it feels like we have a family again." Arya stood beside him, silent, and together they watched the snow drift down, settling over root and stone, blurring the old wounds and the new. Robb was restless. He walked the ramparts, pausing to look north, then south, his breath clouding the air. He spoke little of death, less of the time beyond it, but the scars were there for any to see. Men who served with him had learned to follow his silences, to draw strength from the certainty of his presence, to trust the resolve in his step. He visited the Maester's tower each evening, speaking with those who kept the count of the dead, learning which villages had survived, which roads were passable, which allies had answered Jon's call, and which had not. The news was never good. The Umber's gone. Their keeps burned or held by corpses. White Harbor under siege by the hungry and the desperate. The Boltons vanished into the snow. Their banners lost. Their name a curse whispered only by fools. Yet, as the days passed, the mood in Winterfell shifted. It was not hope that bloomed, not yet, but something harder, resolve, born from having survived the unthinkable. There were fewer tears, more laughter in the kitchens, songs sung in the yard, even a wildling woman teaching the Stark children to throw snowballs with the accuracy of a sling stone. Sansa watched it all from the windows above, her eyes moving between the yard and the distant forest, weighing every moment against the memories of loss. One night, Sansa summoned Jon and Robb to her solar. The fire burned high, casting the room in amber and gold. She did not offer wine, only a thin broth, and waited until they had finished before speaking. "The time is coming when we must choose our next steps," she said, her voice low. "The dead are beaten back, but not destroyed. The North cannot stand alone forever. The Vale remains neutral, and the Riverlands bleed. If we do not move, we will be swallowed again when the next night falls. There's a now." Jon leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You think we should march?" "I think we must," Sansa said, "but not as before. If we ride out, it is not as conquerors or rebels. We must call every house that remains, every lord, every free folk clan, every soul who survived the darkness. If we do not unite, we will die apart." Robb's eyes met hers, shadows flickering in their depths. "They may not follow. Many fear me, more fear Melisandre and the fire she brings." Sansa shook her head. "Let them see you with their own eyes. Let them see Jon at your side. You are not the dead come walking, Robb. You are the last hope of the Old North. If you march, march as brothers, not as rivals, as Starks." Jon nodded, understanding. "The North must see us united, one house, one banner." Robb reached across the table, gripping Jon's wrist. No more talk of crowns, no more blood for pride. Jon squeezed his hand in return. "We fight together." And so it was decided. In the weeks that followed, messages flew across the North and the Riverlands. The banners were called Manderley, Glover, Mormont, Reed, even the scattered remnants of House Karstark. Sansa and Arya worked side by side, organizing supplies, preparing the holdfasts, seeing to the wounded. Gendry forged arrowheads, Brienne trained the youngest in swordplay, and Samuel Tarly, found in the aftermath of the battle, scoured old tomes for forgotten lore, hoping for any word that might give them advantage against the dead. Robb and Jon visited the camps, speaking to each company, hearing the stories of those who had survived. The men rallied, not for glory, but for vengeance, for kin, for the simple refusal to die. Even those who had once knelt to Ramsay Bolton or the Freys found a place beneath the direwolf banner. The day before the march, the lords and captains gathered in the great hall. Sansa stood at Jon's side, Arya at Robb's, the direwolf's ghost and Nymeria stalking the shadows behind. Melisandre lingered by the hearth, her red eyes hooded, silent as death. Jon spoke first, his voice carrying to every corner. "We have all lost. Family, friends, homes. The dead will come again, and when they do, they will find us ready. The wall is gone. The old world is gone. We fight for the living. Them Tuan." Robb's voice followed, iron and fire. "Let no man say this is a war for crowns or castles. This is a war for dawn. The sun will rise again only if we hold together. For the North, for all of Westeros." Manderley, heavy and tired, stood and bowed his great head. "For the North," he echoed. The cry was taken up, by lords, by wildlings, by maids and boys, even by those who had once called themselves enemies. The sound filled the hall, shaking dust from the beams, rattling the banners that hung above. That night, Jon and Robb met alone in the Godswood. Arya found them there, arms slung over each other's shoulders, speaking in low voices. She sat at their feet, her head against the heart tree, the three siblings united beneath the blood-red leaves. In the dark, Robb confessed, voice raw. Sometimes in the night, I feel the cold calling me. I wonder if I am truly alive or just some wraith given shape by her fire. Jon rested a hand on his brother's shoulder. You are here. With us. That is enough. There. Arya, half asleep, murmured, We're all ghosts in some way. We fight anyway. They stayed until the moon set, drawing warmth from the nearness of kin, knowing it might be the last such night. The march began at first light. 1,000 riders, 2,000 on foot, wildlings and kneelers and free folk, all bound by the same desperate hope. The banners of Stark and Tully, Manderley and Mormont rose above the columns, and for the first time since the world turned to darkness, laughter rippled through the ranks. They moved east, toward White Harbor, where rumor claimed the dead massed along the river. The journey was slow, roads blocked by drifts, bridges destroyed, villages abandoned to ice. At every crossroads, more men joined. Survivors from small keeps, farmers with axes, outlaws who had nothing left to lose. In White Harbor, Lord Manderley welcomed them, his city battered but standing. The dead had tried the walls and failed, and the river itself ran red from the slaughter. There, the brothers saw what was coming. Not an army, but a tide. A crawling, relentless mass that turned the snow to mud and the living to corpses. They prepared for siege. The city was fortified, every street barricaded, every house turned to a redoubt. Melisandre and her priests lit great fires at every gate, and the Red Woman herself patrolled the ramparts, her presence enough to make even the hardiest shiver. The attack came as the sun vanished, a sudden, howling wave of cold and shadow. Whites poured from the river, their bodies twisted, broken, driven by the silent will of the others. The living met them with steel and fire. Arya slipped through the streets, a shadow among shadows, her blade flashing in the moonlight. Gendry's hammers rang against bone and ice. Brienne fought at the fish gate, holding the line as the dead surged again and again. Jon and Robb rode together at the south wall, their swords rising and falling, the direwolf's ghost and Nymeria tearing through the horde. The brothers fought as one, backs to each other, trusting as they had in childhood. The men who saw them said later it was as if the gods themselves had descended. Ice and fire, death and life. Brothers joined in purpose. Melisandre called down fire from the ramparts, her voice ringing above the din, and for a moment the dead faltered, the flames casting monstrous shadows across the river. But the others would not be denied. A white shadow moved among the horde. A tall, silent figure, eyes cold as the grave, sword of ice in hand. Robb saw him first, felt the ancient fear grip his heart. He pressed forward, Jon at his side, and together they met the foe in the broken courtyard of the old market. Steel met ice with a scream that split the night. The others pressed, silent and implacable, and Jon felt the cold driving into his bones, the memory of his own death rising up. Robb faltered, a flicker of pain crossing his face, but Jon's voice pulled him back. Robb, now! Together, they struck, the Valyrian blade Longclaw and Robb's own sword, still darkened by death. The other reeled, blue fire bursting from its wounds, and the whites fell back, keening in the cold. But it was not enough. More pressed in, the tide unending. Robb staggered, the cold gnawing at his soul. Melisandre appeared at their side, her face alight with flame. Hold fast, she cried. The dawn is coming. She flung her hands wide, fire bursting from her palms, scorching the night. For a moment, the dead broke, the others retreating, but Robb collapsed to his knees, breath ragged, eyes wide. Jon dropped beside him, clutching his brother's shoulders. Robb, stay with me. Robb's hand found Jon's. Don't let me go, Jon. Don't? The fire burned brighter, the Red Woman's voice ringing out, and slowly, the color returned to Robb's cheeks. He rose, unsteady but alive, his eyes burning with new resolve. The battle raged until dawn, the living holding, the dead finally breaking beneath the rising sun. When at last it was over, Jon and Robb stood atop the battered gate, bloodied but unbowed. The North had survived another night, but winter was far from over. and the world yet trembled on the edge of shadow. In the days that followed, word spread of the brothers who had turned the tide, of the Red Woman's fire, of the living united beneath the direwolf banner. Allies came from the south, men of the Vale, the last of the Baratheons, even a few old Lannister knights seeking redemption. In the stillness after battle, Jon and Robb met in the Godswood of White Harbor, alone beneath the twisted willows. Robb's face was drawn, his hair touched with frost, but his eyes were clear. "We will fight again," Robb said. Jon nodded. "We will. And after that, until the dead are truly gone. Or we are." "Mentau." Robb smiled. A true smile, fierce and proud. "So long as we stand together, I am not afraid." Jon reached out, and for the first time since their childhood, the brothers Stark embraced. No king, no lord. Only blood, only hope, only the promise that as long as the wolves of Winterfell endured, the darkness would never truly win. Above them, the first rays of the sun broke through the clouds, lighting the snow to gold, and the Godswood was silent save for the whisper of hope returning, slow and unsteady, but alive. "Shay, unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later." 941 AFC phone. 190 Threx. 720 Bain. EK. Ondo. The last of the whites burned through the night, their bodies stacked high along White Harbor's southern fields, the pyres feeding a bitter wind that swept ashes out to sea. Even when the flames faded, the stench lingered. Charred bone, scorched linen, something darker and stranger that clung to the skin. Those who survived the siege would speak of it for years. The night the dead came from the river, when fire and steel held back winter for one more dawn. Jon stood on the city's battered walls, watching the pyres burn, wrapped in his black cloak. His hands were raw and scarred, the nails broken and black with old blood. Ghosts sat at his side, muzzle flecked with soot, eyes glinting in the half-light. The city below had fallen quiet. No more cries, no more screams, only the soft shuffle of men rebuilding, a lull after terror. Every footstep, every hammer blow, felt like an act of defiance. Robb came to stand with him at sunrise, shoulders stooped with exhaustion, armor flecked with ash and ice. His face was older than Jon remembered from their youth, but there was a steadiness there, a sense of something forged in flame and grief. "It's not over," Robb said quietly. Jon shook his head, watching the sun climb above the ruined city. "No, the others will come again. Maybe not here, maybe not for weeks, but they will come." Robb's gaze flickered over the city's broken gates, the clustered survivors, riverlords, Northmen, wildlings, women and children huddled together for warmth. "They'll remember at least," Robb said, "what we did here. The lords, the small folk, that we fought together. Nadarei. For now," Jon said, "when the fighting's done, they'll remember only what they want. Men have short memories." Robb's laugh was bitter. "Not in the north they don't." A horn sounded in the city. A sharp, shrill note, urgent and demanding. Jon stiffened, instinct moving before thought. Robb drew his cloak tighter, his eyes narrowing. Another horn, then another, followed by the tramp of booted feet, and the clatter of horses' hooves over cobblestones. Jon moved down from the wall, Ghost at his heel, Robb beside him. The city's main gate swung wide, and a party rode in. Armed knights, banners bright and strange in the sunlight. Sable birds on silver, a purple mountain, a golden stag. Behind the knights rode Sansa, her hair streaming behind her in the wind, a hard light in her eyes. Jon exhaled, relief and dread mingling. He met Sansa at the gate, bracing himself for her words. She wasted no time with courtesies. "The Vale has come," she said. "Lord Jon Royce rides behind me, and Pettier Baelish with him for now. The Vale's men fill the road for leagues. There are others, too, marching up from the Riverlands, some from the Reach, even a handful of Stormlanders who would see Baratheon banners fly again. The South is waking. Many." Robb stepped forward, the sun striking red highlights in his hair. And what of Winterfell? Sansa's voice was cool, but Jon caught the tremor beneath. Winterfell stands. The walls are whole, the stocks full, and the banners of Stark and Manderley fly from every tower. But the lords grow restless, Jon. They question every order. Some remember the days before the dead, when men fought for thrones, not survival. Nakao. Jon and Robb shared a look. An old conversation resumed with a glance. They'll come north, Jon said. The others have not forgotten us, nor have the whites. If the south truly marches, let them march to Winterfell. We make our stand there one last time. Robb nodded. Let them come. The wolves will meet them, living and dead both. The armies gathered through the deep weeks of winter. The North's survivors limped homeward, banners fluttering ragged and proud. The Vale's knights came, iron discipline and bright lances gleaming. The river lords followed, grim and weary, men of Blackwood and Bracken, Tully and Frey, all old enmities drowned in a common fear. From the Reach rode armored columns under banners half familiar, Florent, Tarley, Fossaway, and in their wake came stragglers from the Stormlands, their shields battered, their eyes hollow. Winterfell swelled with humanity, refugees, soldiers, smiths, children. The walls rang with voices from dawn to dusk, the yards alive with the ring of hammers, the sharp crack of practice blades, the grumbling of cooks and stable boys. Sansa became the soul of the keep, her voice cool and clear above the hubbub, settling disputes, organizing rations, reminding lords and peasants alike that a Stark's word was law. Arya moved through the chaos like a spirit, her face half forgotten already, but every rumor of her deeds in the siege grew wilder in the telling. She watched the new arrivals from shadowed halls, weighing friend against foe, never far from the God's Wood or her brothers. Jon took command of the outer defenses, working beside old Sir Dinis Mallister and Lord Jon Royce, mapping fields of fire, rooming the battered towers. The wall that had once separated Wildling and Kneeler now vanished. Tormund Giantsbane's red hair was often seen among the Mormont axes, Wildlings and Northmen laughing together as they hauled stone and timber, all grudges forgotten. Even the Glover men, once cold and proud, found kinship with the clans from the hills. War had made them all equal. Robb drifted between camps, never quite at ease among the living. He spoke to the men, gave orders, but always there was something haunted in his step, a distance Jon could not cross. At night he walked the walls alone, his eyes drawn north, listening to a wind only he seemed to hear. It was Melisandre who finally found Robb on one such night, her red robes trailing in the frost, her voice softer than Jon had ever heard. You feel it, don't you? The pull of the dark, the fire in your blood. Robb kept his gaze on the horizon. I feel nothing but cold. No fire. Not anymore. Then on the Rhine. Melisandre smiled, sad and strange. The fire is always there. It keeps you walking, even when the world would see you dead. It burns in Jon too. Together, you are the sword the world needs. Robb's voice was rough. We're only men, not swords, not gods. She laughed softly. Men do more than gods ever could. He turned to her, weary but unbowed. Pray your God is watching then, because if the dead come again, there'll be no miracle to save us. The snow deepened, covering every old scar, every new grave. Days slipped by, measured in sword strokes, in broken bread, in the brief warmth of firelight. Then, as the moon waned, the first refugees staggered in from the last hearth. Eyes wide, voices shaking. The dead had returned. Worse, the Night King himself had been seen on the road, riding a horse of ice, his gaze freezing every stream, every tree in his path. Winterfell went to arms. Jon stood on the battlements as the banners were called, every lord and captain summoned to the yard. Robb was at his side, sword in hand, the direwolf's ghost and Nymeria weaving between their legs. The walls were lined with archers, the gates braced with timber and iron. Fires blazed atop every tower, Melisandre's priests feeding the flames with strange powders that burned blue and white. The dead came as the sun set, a black tide against the snow, their eyes 1,000 points of blue fire. The Night King rode at their head, his cloak billowing, his sword gleaming like moonlight. The living met them with arrows, with boiling oil, with axes and spears, but the whites came on, silent and relentless. The siege lasted 3 days and nights, the longest Winterfell had ever known. Jon and Robb fought side by side, never separated by more than a blade's length. Arya darted through the chaos, her face blood-streaked, her blade flashing silver. Sansa stood with the women and children in the crypts, blade in hand, her voice a calm anchor in the storm. On the third night, the dead breached the outer gate. The Night King himself strode into the yard, the whites parting before him. He raised his sword, and the air itself seemed to freeze. Jon met him, long claw in his grip, Robb at his side, and for a moment, the world held its breath. They fought together, sword against ice, wolf against white. Robb fell once, a white's blade slipping between his ribs. But fire flashed from Melisandre's hand, and the wound sealed, his eyes blazing. Jon drove Longclaw through the Night King's chest, but the blade shattered, spraying black ice. For a heartbeat, all was still. Then Arya was there, leaping from the shadows, her dagger, Valyrian steel, slender as a sliver of night, slashing the air. She struck the Night King's hand, sending his sword spinning. Sansa called out from the crypts, her voice rising above the chaos, and the women surged forward, axes and torches in hand. Robb grabbed Jon's hand, pulled him upright. Together, Jon, now. Jon snatched Arya's fallen dagger, Robb drew his own, and together they drove the blades into the Night King's chest. One of ice, one of ice, one of fire, both Starks united. The Night King howled, his face twisting in shock and rage, blue fire spilling from his eyes, his mouth. The whites fell, collapsing into heaps of brittle bone and rags. The winter wind shrieked, and then was silent. Dawn rose, gold and bloody, over the ruins of Winterfell. The survivors emerged blinking, battered, uncertain. The last of the dead lay still, truly lifeless. Jon fell to his knees in the yard, exhausted, tears hot on his cheeks. Arya knelt beside him, silent. Robb leaned on his sword, breathing hard, the fire in his eyes guttering at last. The cost was beyond counting. Hundreds dead, the yard slick with blood and melted snow. The walls broken, the old god's tree scorched by fire. Sansa found Jon and Robb in the stillness and knelt with them, her arms around both. For a long time no one spoke. At last, Robb looked up, his eyes meeting Jon's. "It's done." Jon shook his head. "It's never done. But it's over for now." They stood together, the three Starks, brother, sister, surrounded by the last of the North's strength. The Direwolves at their side. The sun climbed higher, and for the first time in memory, the wind felt warm. In the days that followed, the wounded were tended, the dead mourned. The Southern Lords paid fealty to House Stark, not for crowns, not for power, but for survival. The old rivalries faded, washed away by the blood of a common enemy. Sansa ruled from Winterfell's high seat, her word law, her heart heavy but unbroken. Arya slipped away at dusk, as she always did. But the rumors of her legend grew until children told stories of her for generations. Robb lingered in the north for a time, always restless, always haunted. Melisandre vanished into the east, her purpose fulfilled, her flames gone out. Jon stood atop the wall, the battered remnant of it, looking north, ghost at his side, watching as the snows melted, as spring crept south. He carried no crown, no banner, only the memory of brothers united, of the price they'd paid. He thought of Robb, of Sansa, of Arya and Bran, and all the ghosts that watched with him. He thought of the fire and the ice, the dawn that followed the night, and the quiet promise that so long as the wolves endured, the darkness would always find a foe in the north. And so the world turned, the north healed, and the story of two brothers, one returned from death, the other raised from nothing, became the memory of an age, whispered on the wind for as long as winter's heart endured. K. Shenda. For days, Winterfell's yard was given over to grief and repair. The wounded were laid out on straw pallets in the great hall, where the maesters worked by lantern light, Sansa at their side, her hand steady and sure. The battered lords of every house came before Jon and Robb, not to bend the knee, not anymore, but to seek guidance, to ask for justice or comfort, or simply to stand in silent witness of what the night had taken. The wall still rang with hammers and the shrill calls of children, for life persisted even in the shadow of death. Jon walked the ramparts each morning, ghost a pale wraith at his heel. There was a hush upon the land, the kind of silence that fell only after the worst storms had passed. Every breath of wind across the yard, every swirl of snow past the scorched godswood, felt like the echo of something long vanquished. Yet Jon's rest was uneasy. In dreams he wandered in endless white, seeking faces now gone. Sand's gentle wisdom, Ed's grim jests, old Maester Aemon's trembling hands. He woke always with a sense of loss, the weight of all those left behind pressing upon him. Sansa met him in the library, ledgers spread wide, candles guttering in the morning chill. She spoke of food stores, of healing, of alliances, her voice quick and precise. Jon listened, trusting her judgment more than his own. There were talks of the future, the rebuilding of the wall, the tending of the fields, the resettling of ruined villages. Some lords urged him to call a great council, to claim the title of king in the north once more. Others muttered about Robb's place, uneasy with his resurrection, and with Melisandre's vanished shadow. Jon gave no answer. The idea of kingship sat heavier now than ever. He had seen what crowns cost. He bore the memory of it in every scar. Robb spent his days among the men. He ate with the wounded, trained the youngest with shield and spear, listened to the wildlings' tales of the lands beyond the now broken wall. His presence steadied the restless, for there was something in his bearing, neither ghost nor king, but a Stark made whole by pain. The fear that had clung to him at first began to ebb, replaced by a wary respect. If he slept at all, it was in the armory, wrapped in a cloak by the embers, or atop the walls with the direwolves at his feet. Arya was seen less and less. She vanished for days into the wilds, returning only when her wounds reopened or when word from the south arrived by raven. She spoke little, but the stories of her grew. Arya who slew the Night King, Arya who passed through shadows, Arya who whispered to wolves. Sansa worried, but Jon understood. After what they had seen, none could stay caged long. The south, for a time, was quiet. The Vale's men remained, their Lord Jon Royce as grave as the mountain. Petyr Baelish slithered through the halls, his schemes stifled by Sansa's clear-sighted command and the watchful eyes of Brienne of Tarth. News came from the Riverlands. Edmure Tully restored to River Run, the Freys scattered, the fields thick with the bones of winter's war. The Reach licked its wounds, sending gifts of grain and promises of support. Even the Stormlands answered Sansa's call, their battered banners joining those that hung above Winterfell's gates. It was mid-morning when the first raven arrived, marked with the sigil of the Iron Throne, a black stag crowned in gold. Jon broke the seal in the solar, Sansa and Robb at his side. The message was curt, written in a slanted hand. King Aegon of House Targaryen, sixth of his name, invites the lords of the north to King's Landing to discuss the future of the realm and to swear oaths of peace. All houses shall be represented. Send your answer by return raven. The realm waits. They read the letter in silence. Sansa's mouth drew tight, but it was Robb who spoke first. Aegon. The dragons come again then. Jon nodded. He'd heard whispers of the Boy King. A Targaryen returned with gold and sellswords from across the sea. There had been tales of dragons, some wild, some wondrous, but Jon believed only half of them. Still, the weight of history pressed down on him. The North had bled too often for Southern games. Sansa's voice was low, cautious. If the realm is truly at peace, if the dragons are real, it changes everything. Jon looked to Robb. Would you have us go south? Robb's eyes were old in the morning light. I would have us go as Starks, not as supplicants. If there's peace to be had, we'll see it with our own eyes. Preparations were swift. The news rippled through Winterfell. Jon, Sansa, and Robb would ride for King's Landing, a host of banners behind them. Arya chose not to go, only kissing Sansa's brow and clasping Jon's hand, her promise unspoken. "If you call for me," she said, "I'll come." She slipped away before dawn, her footsteps silent in the snow. They rode south in high winter, the roads carved through drifts, the sun bright but weak. The procession was small: Jon, Sansa, Robb, Sir Davos, Lord Glover, a handful of chosen guards. The banners of Stark and Manderley flew at the head, but there was no display of grandeur. The memory of the last war was too fresh, the grief too close. The villages they passed were empty, burned or abandoned. But some faces peered from shuttered windows, mouths open in wonder at the sight of so many lords together, at the deer wolves walking among men. In the Riverlands, Edmure Tully met them at the crossroads with a company of knights. He embraced Robb as one returned from the grave, clasped Jon's hand with gratitude, and listened quietly to Sansa's measured questions about the new king. The further south they rode, the more the signs of spring emerged: buds on blackened trees, new grass struggling through the snow. Jon felt a hope there, but also a wariness. It was easy to believe in peace when the world was green, harder when winter's scars remained. King's Landing rose before them at last, smoke drifting from its towers, the city restless with rumor. The gates swung open at their arrival, gold cloaks lining the streets. Small folk crowded the alleys, whispering of Starks, of ghosts, of wolves and dragons. They were led to the Red Keep, its walls scrubbed but stained by fire. There, in the throne room beneath the shattered remnants of the great dragon skulls, waited the new king, a youth with silver hair, violet eyes, and the careful poise of a boy taught to be wary of blades. At his right stood a woman in black and red, Daenerys Stormborn, the queen whose name had once been a curse in the north. Aegon greeted them with courtesy, Daenerys with cool grace. The court was full: Martells from the south, Tyrells in exile, even a scattering of Greyjoys, uneasy and proud. Jon bowed. Sansa curtsied. Robb inclined his head, but did not kneel. "We come as guests, not as subjects," Sansa said, her voice ringing in the great hall. Aegon smiled, young and weary. "The realm has had enough of subjects and masters. I would have allies." The days that followed were a dance of words and promises. Sansa moved through the court with silent skill, drawing the wary into her orbit, unraveling plots with a glance. Robb spent his time among the knights, testing them on the yard, forging respect through sweat and steel. Jon found himself the subject of rumor and awe. The bastard who slew the Night King, the brother who rose with the dawn. Each night, the siblings met in their chamber, sharing what they had learned. Sansa spoke of Daenerys, her strength, her scars, the way the Dragon Queen watched Jon with a complicated mixture of pain and longing. Robb spoke of old grudges, the wariness of the southern lords, the hunger for gold and peace alike. Jon listened, weighing every word. On the eve of the council, Daenerys came to Jon alone, her face shadowed in the torchlight. "You are the North," she said, "but the realm needs unity. I will not burn the North again. Stand with us, and your people will be free." Jon studied her. "And Robb?" She smiled, sadness in her eyes. "He walks in both worlds. The living will never fully trust him. The dead will never claim him, but the realm will remember what you did, together." He nodded, his mind troubled, his heart divided. The council convened beneath the shattered throne. Every house sent its voice. There were calls for vengeance, for justice, for independence, for golden land. Jon spoke little, but when he did, the room stilled. "The North will remember its dead," he said, "but we will not spill more blood for old grievances. The Night King is gone. If the South can promise peace, we will keep it. If not, we will leave and hold our land." Aegon rose, his voice clear. "Then let the North be free, as long as the Starks keep the peace. Let every house send aid to rebuild. Let dragons fly not to conquer, but to protect. Now, The oaths were sworn in the old tongue, hands joined, a new compact for a new age. For the first time in centuries, the North stood as an equal to the South, not as a conquered land. When the council ended, Jon and Robb stood at the balcony, watching the city below. Sansa joined them, her hand resting on Jon's shoulder. "We have a chance now," she said. "A real chance." Jon nodded. Robb's gaze was distant, searching the horizon as if he saw both past and future in the same line of smoke. "What will you do, brother?" Jon asked. Robb smiled, weary but at peace. "I will go north where the land is wild and the nights are long. I'll keep watch, as I always have. Someone must remember." Sansa's eyes shone with tears. "Come back to us when you can." "I will," Robb promised. That night, they feasted in the Red Keep, Northmen and Southron together. Songs were sung, horns of ale lifted high, and for a moment the ghosts faded. But as the moon rose, Jon slipped from the hall, finding Robb atop the walls. They stood in silence, two brothers in a world remade by their choices. "Do you regret it?" Jon asked quietly. Robb's answer was simple. "No. I regret only the time lost. But now, for the first time I feel alive." Jon clasped his hand. "The North endures." "And so do we," Robb said. They watched the stars above King's Landing, the city at their feet, the future uncertain but bright with hope. And as the wind carried the sounds of laughter and song up to the battlements, the brothers Stark knew that whatever else came, they had given the world a dawn worth defending. In the north, the snows began to melt, and for the first time in a generation, the wolves of Winterfell looked not only to survive, but to thrive. "Kindly, Aiden. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later." 941, B47, A59. 5975E8 B India. Email Perry. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 941 B79, 1545 E91. SJC. AK. The journey home began in the pale gray light before dawn. Winter's chill clung to the stones of King's Landing, but spring was in the air, a stubborn, insistent warmth pushing through the frost. Jon stood in the courtyard of the Red Keep, Ghost at his side, watching the banners of the North ripple against the breeze. Sansa mounted her horse with a practiced grace. Her gaze swept the city's spires and the waiting crowd of lords and commoners alike. Robb lingered on the steps a moment longer, head bowed beneath the shadow of the walls, the faintest smile at the corner of his mouth, as if he heard music no one else could. They left the city without fanfare. The southern lords and knights pressed close, offering farewells, tokens of alliance, promises made with the careful language of survivors. Aegon himself watched from the high gate, Daenerys at his shoulder, her eyes distant as the horizon. Sansa rode at Jon's side, Robb close behind, their retinue a river of black and gray winding north, across the green fields that had once been trampled by armies and dragons. At the first camp beyond the city, the tents were pitched in a field of new grass. The riverlands had begun to heal, farmers working the plow, children running barefoot, the bones of the war finally buried beneath seed and soil. Sansa broke bread with the village elders, speaking softly, listening long, her laughter the surest sign that peace might yet endure. Robb drifted among the soldiers and free folk, a familiar figure now, his sword at his hip. The hard lines of his face softened when he watched the flames flicker in the dusk. Jon found himself restless. He walked alone at night, Ghost pacing behind him, the stars bright and indifferent above. Sometimes he dreamed of the wall, endless white, the groan of ice, the howl of wind across battlements where only shadows kept watch. He dreamed of Ygritte, of the old gods, of a face glimpsed in fire, Melisandre, perhaps, or the memory of her. The dreams faded with the coming of day, but left him changed, quieter. His heart tugged by things he could not name. The procession moved north at a steady pace, gathering followers with every mile. At the Trident, Edmure Tully rode out to greet them, his banner snapping bright and proud above a river newly swollen with spring's melt. He clasped John and Robb both, and though lines of sorrow still bracketed his eyes, he smiled like a man waking from a long sleep. He rode with them for a day, speaking of repairs and harvests, of children born in the siege, of a world remade. In the neck, Howland Reed sent marsh runners to guide the way. The Cranningmen slipped silently among the willows, eyes bright, weapons hidden, words few. John broke fast with Howland beneath the weirwood's ancient boughs, listening to the old tales of Ned Stark and Ashara Dane, of promises made in blood and mud, of magic older than kings. Reed's words curled around Joan's thoughts as the company pressed on, and he found himself turning over the riddles long after the fires died to embers. As they neared Winterfell, the land grew harsher, the air biting. The banners of the north rose before them, Manderley and Glover and Mormont. Their warriors gathered at the crossroads to greet the returned Starks. Old banners, tattered but proud, dipped low as Jon and Sansa rode through the lines. The wildlings mingled freely with the Northmen, kin now, after so many shared battles, their children laughing together in the fields. Arya was waiting at the gate. She wore leathers and a cloak of gray fur, her hair wild as the wind, Nymeria ranging in the woods beyond the walls. She smiled when she saw them, and for a heartbeat Jon saw her as she'd been. A girl with dirt on her cheeks, a wolf at her heels, fearless and free. They embraced without words. Robb joined them, clasping Arya's shoulders, his face open with a fierce pride. Winterfell itself bore the scars of war. Stones blackened, towers missing their crowns, the godswood scorched around the heart tree. But the halls were full. Women spinning at the hearth, children chasing each other up the stairs, the kitchens alive with the smell of baking bread and roasting meat. Sansa's rule had brought order and hope. The wounded healed, the fields outside sown with barley and wheat. Maester Samwell, called north by Raven, oversaw the library and the sick room, his gentle patience winning hearts from lord to lowborn alike. The lords assembled in the great hall, their voices rising in debate and laughter, the memories of old betrayals blunted by common need. Glover argued with Manderley, Reed counseled patience, the Mormont girl's voice cut through bluster like a blade. Jon sat at the head of the table, Robb at his right, Sansa at his left. He spoke little, listening, measuring, weighing each offer of alliance, each request for justice. It was Sansa who called the council to order when the talk grew heated. She stood at the high seat, her presence commanding silence. "The war is ended," she said, her voice steady, "but winter is not. We must look to the future, to trade, to peace, to the raising of new walls and the teaching of new children. The North will not bend again, nor will we shut our gates against the South. We are one realm, if the realm will have us." "Nenex," the lords murmured assent. Some asked if Jon would be king, others if Robb would rule. Sansa's gaze lingered on her brothers, but she only said, "The North remembers, and the North endures." Robb rose, his voice iron. "I am no king. I have walked beyond the world and returned. That is enough. Let Jon lead if he will. Let Sansa speak with my voice, as she has done so well." Jon shook his head. "We live together as kin, as Starks. There will be no more crowns, no more blood for pride. If the people wish it, we will rule as council, as a house united." 1-6. So it was agreed, and for the first time in memory, the North's lords set aside their rivalries, swearing oaths to House Stark and to each other. There was feasting in the hall that night, music and stories, the laughter of children, the thump of boots on old wood. Davos danced with wildling girls. Arya drank with the Umbers. Sansa watched from the dais, her eyes shining with something almost like peace. In the quiet that followed, Jon found Robb on the walls, the night cold and clear around them. They looked out over Winterfell, the lights bright in every window. "You could have been king," Jon said. Robb's smile was rueful. "I was once. I lost everything for it. I would rather be your brother than any king." Jon nodded, the words heavy in his chest. "I saw you die, Robb. I never thought I'd see you again." Robb looked away. "Sometimes I wish I had stayed gone. The world is full of ghosts, Jon. We walk among them every day. But if I had stayed dead, the North would be lost. D. John placed a hand on Robb's shoulder. You brought us home. They stood together in silence, the wind singing through the broken stones. Spring grew bolder as the weeks passed. The snow melted from the roofs, rivers broke free of their icy chains, and the fields outside Winterfell shimmered with green. The survivors of the wars set to work, planting, mending, teaching their children the old ways and the new. Arya rode out often, sometimes for days, returning with tales of wildlings in the hills or outlaws on the roads. Gendry, who had come north with the Starks, stayed on, setting up his forge by the east gate, teaching orphans to shape steel. Maester Samwell sent ravens to the far corners of the realm, gathering lore and news, cataloging what remained of the Old Order. In the crypts, Sansa set aside space for the names of the lost, fallen at the Wall, at White Harbor, at Winterfell. She spoke their names each night before sleep, her prayers weaving memory into hope. Robb wandered the north, alone or with a handful of loyal men, visiting distant villages, offering counsel, helping where he could. The fear that had clung to him faded. Children chased his horse, women blessed him, men offered their oaths. He became a legend in his own time, a king who had died, a Stark who had seen the night and returned. Jon took no titles, but the people called him Wolf King behind his back. He walked the fields at dusk, listened to the songs of the shepherds, taught the boys of Winterfell to ride and fight. Ghost was never far from his side. When troubles rose, a murder in the city, a bandit raid, a harvest threatened, Jon was there, his judgment fair, his justice swift. The ravens brought news of peace in the south. Aegon and Daenerys ruling together, dragons flying above fields, turned gold. Old wounds slowly healing. The Iron Islands sent ships laden with fish and trade goods. Dorne offered fruit and salt. The Reach promised wheat for the North's timber and furs. For the first time in living memory, the realm was united, not by fear, but by hope. Yet the scars of war were deep. On winter nights, Sansa still wept for the lost. Robb would sometimes ride to the edge of the world and stare north, as if searching for something only he could see. Arya dreamed of strange faces in distant lands. Jon's dreams were haunted by snow and blood, by a voice on the wind that whispered, "Remember." But the North endured. New songs were sung in the halls, of wolves and dragons, of a night turned to day, of brothers who stood together when all hope seemed lost. The heart tree bloomed red in the godswood, its roots sunk deep into blood and memory. In the quiet of his chamber, Jon wrote a letter to Aegon, the ink smudged, the words plain. The North remembers. We will hold our oaths. If the darkness ever rises, we will stand together. Tell the Queen, winter is ended. Let summer come. He sealed it with wax, the direwolf's head pressed deep, and sent it south with the first returning raven. When the sun rose, Jon stood on Winterfell's highest tower, Ghost at his side, the wind in his hair. He looked out across the fields, the rivers, the wild, broken land. Below, Sansa and Arya walked together among the apple trees, their laughter rising on the breeze. Robb was riding the fields beyond, his horse kicking up plumes of fresh grass. The world had changed, and so had he. But as long as the wolves of Winterfell endured, Jon knew there would always be hope. For the North, for the realm, for all the children of summer yet to come. K. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. And 40 WAB BFC 36 EADS Evan 15 Bine. 80. Canwall. The day broke clear and pale, the sky washed clean by a night of spring rain. From Winterfell's battlements, Jon watched as new grass pushed stubborn green fingers through the blackened earth where whites had once fallen. The rivers swelled with meltwater. The air was fresh and sharp. Life, impossibly, was returning. Jon had spent the early hours with the builders, walking the outer walls where stone was mortared, where wood was raised in place of what fire and siege had claimed. He lent his hands and his eyes and his voice, but mostly he listened. To laughter among the men, to quarrels and questions, to the sound of hammers echoing into the clear morning. These were not his black brothers of the wall, nor the seasoned veterans of the wars, but farmers and fishermen, craftsmen and wildlings who had chosen to stay. Every day, the boundaries of Northmen and free folk, noble and common, blurred a little further. Jon felt it. Something new was being built atop the ruins, something that might outlast even winter. He made his way to the godswood as the sun rose higher, the dew still heavy on the grass. The heart tree stood silent, its leaves fresh as blood, the old face staring into the sky. Arya was there already, sitting cross-legged at the roots, her fingers worrying the edge of a blade. She didn't turn as Jon approached, but he heard the smile in her voice. "You move quieter than you used to." Jon sat beside her, Ghost settling at his feet. "Or maybe you hear better." She glanced over, Wolf's eyes meeting his. "I dream of them sometimes. The faces I wore, the places I went. I don't think I'll ever be done wandering." He picked up a fallen leaf, rubbing it between his thumb and forefinger. "You don't have to stay. You never did." Arya shrugged. "Where else would I go? I've seen the edge of the world and the darkness in men's hearts. Here, at least the ghosts know my name." He reached for her hand, squeezing it. "This is your home, Arya, whenever you want it." "Not when you are." She leaned her head against his shoulder, the moment fragile as glass. After a while she asked, "Will you ever go south again?" He shook his head. "Not if I can help it. There's enough to do here." She grinned, and it was a memory of the wolf girl she had been, fierce and wild. "Good. I'd miss you too much." The council met in the solar that afternoon. Sansa presiding, Robb at her right, Jon at her left. The sunlight poured through the tall windows, glinting off inkpots and scrolls, catching the red in Sansa's hair. Glover, Manderly, and Reed attended, their faces open and thoughtful, with Lady Lyanna Mormont, small and sharp-eyed, at the foot of the table. Samwell Tarly read a letter aloud from Oldtown, full of news of new crops, new learning, and quiet promises of trade and peace. After the formalities, the talk turned to threats and rumors. The Ironborn had begun sending traders rather than reavers, but there were stories of a new captain among them, young and ambitious, seeking to carve a name in blood and salt. Dorne had requested a delegation, no longer a realm apart, but curious, cautious, and keen to see if the old enemies could become something like kin. Sansa steered the talk with gentle firmness. The North's strength is not in its walls but in its people. If the harvest is good and the peace holds, we must welcome strangers, not bar the gates. Robb added, "If there are swords to spare, send them to the borders. But keep the best in Winterfell. We have learned enough of what happens when we trust the world to keep its word." Jon agreed, his voice low but steady. "It's not peace if we're always waiting for war. Let's build something better." The lords murmured assent. The council turned to matters of law and grain and justice, but the air was lighter than in winters past. When the meeting broke, Sansa lingered by the window with Sam, discussing the old histories. Robb drifted out to the yard to spar with Gendry and the young squires. Jon wandered through the kitchens, tasting bread, listening to the talk of the bakers, letting the smallness of daily life settle around him. That evening, a letter arrived on black wings, raven from the wall, or what remained of it. The messenger was a grizzled man in the black of the Night's Watch, but there was no stiffness in his step. He saluted Jon with the easy familiarity of old brothers in arms. "Lord Snow, beg pardon, Lord Stark. Castle Black's near empty, but there's a few of us keep the stones from falling. And there's been strangers in the haunted forest. No threat yet, but not free folk either. Scouts say they wear black, but not our black. They move like ghosts and never leave a trace." Jon took the letter, nodding for the man to sit by the fire and eat his fill. He read the message in the silence of his solar. The words were spare, but ominous. The shadows stir. Strange fires in the north. Men unquiet. We'll send more when known. Stand ready. Dewin, acting first steward. Jon felt the old chill down his spine. He sought out Robb, who was oiling his sword in the barracks, and showed him the note. Robb read it twice. "It's not over. It never is, Jon said, a weary smile touching his lips. They found Sansa in the library, Arya curled in a chair nearby, one leg slung over the arm. Sansa took the letter with calm hands, reading it aloud. She met Jon's eyes across the table. Do we send riders? We watch and wait, Jon said. If it's bandits or deserters, we can deal with it. If it's more, he trailed off, remembering Blue eyes, the feel of cold steel in his chest, a voice whispering from the fire. We'll need to be ready. Robb put a hand on Arya's shoulder. I'll ride north with a few men. No banners. If it's nothing, we come home before the first harvest. If it's more, we send word. Then Melisandre. Arya was already up, strapping her knife to her belt. You'll need me. Sansa's lips pressed thin, but she nodded. Take Ghost. Take Nymeria if she'll come. And send ravens each day. So it was decided. That night, Jon and Robb walked the walls together, the air heavy with the promise of another trial. Are you afraid? Robb asked quietly, his face shadowed. Jon shook his head, meaning it. I've seen the worst. Whatever this is, it can be faced. Robb smiled, the old warmth glinting through. We were always better together. Always, Jon agreed. They clasped hands, not as king and lord, but as brothers, the bond between them stronger for all it had endured. Robb and Arya set out at dawn, Ghost running at their heels, a handful of trusted men in their wake. The ride north was quiet, the land waking around them. They stopped in ruined holdfasts, spoke with wildling sentries, shared news and bread. At Castle Black, they found the survivors. Dewin, stooped but alert, a dozen old black brothers, a scattering of free folk. The castle was smaller than before, its halls echoing and bare. We saw them, Dewin rasped. 6 or 7, moving like shadows. Never spoke, never took food, but left marks on the trees. Old runes, maybe. One of ours tried to follow and came back 3 days later, tongue cut out, blue as frost. Arya's jaw set. We'll go ourselves. Robb led the way into the haunted forest. The air was thin, the trees ancient, the ground littered with old bones and new life pushing through the moss. They moved quietly, leaving little sign, Arya ranging ahead, Ghost silent as a whisper. On the 3rd day, they found a circle of stones, blackened at the edges, and the remains of a fire that had burned with a strange blue flame. There were bones there, some animal, some not. And in the ashes, a rune, a spiral like the mark the others had left on the land. Robb bent, tracing the symbol. It's starting again. Arya's eyes flashed. Not if we end it first. They camped nearby, sending a raven to Winterfell. That night, the shadows moved at the edge of their firelight. Ghost snarled, fur bristling, and Arya slid from her blankets, blade in hand. There was a sense of eyes on them, a breath held. But no attack came. When dawn broke, the stones were scattered, the rune broken. Only footprints remained, bare, inhumanly long, vanishing into the dark. Robb stood at clearing's edge, his face hard. We hunt them. We finish this, or it never ends. Arya nodded, fierce and unafraid. Together, they moved deeper into the forest, the old magic stirring. Arya slipped through shadows, Robb following, the dire wolves never far. They tracked the strangers north and east, beyond where the wall had stood, into lands even the free folk called cursed. The cold returned, the trees blackened, the sky growing thin and pale. They found more circles, more runes, signs of old power reawakening. At last, in a clearing of dead trees, they found them. 6 figures in black, their faces masked, their movements smooth and unnatural. At their center, a woman with eyes like frozen lakes, her voice ringing in a tongue neither Robb nor Arya knew. Robb called out, "This is the land of the living. Be gone." "Mine." The woman's gaze settled on him. "The darkness sleeps but never dies. We are its memory. We are what comes after. You, Stark, are a revenant, born of death and fire. You should have joined us." Arya stepped forward. "Hey, belongs with us." The woman smiled, cruel and ancient. "For now." Robb's sword flashed. "If you are of the dead, return to your graves." The figures advanced, blades of black glass in hand. Ghost and Nymeria leapt forward, Arya darting into the fray, Robb meeting the first foe blade to blade. The battle was fierce and silent, a clash of steel and magic beneath a sky that watched without mercy. In the end, Robb and Arya stood bloodied but unbroken, the 6 strangers dead at their feet. The woman's body melted to ice, her final whisper lost on the wind. Arya knelt beside Robb, breathing hard. "Is it done?" He wiped his blade clean, meeting her gaze. "For now, but will always be needed. So long as winter lives, so do we." They burned the bodies, scattered the stones, marked the place for the living and the dead. Then, with the direwolves at their side, they turned for home. Spring deepened. The news of Robb and Arya's victory spread across the north. Old fears eased. Children slept sounder. At Winterfell, Jon waited each night on the walls, his heart at once anxious and calm. When his siblings returned, weary but alive, the joy in the hall could not be measured. Sansa hosted a feast for them, songs and laughter rising above the sound of rain on stone. Council met, the lords praised Robb and Arya, but it was Jon who spoke last. "We will never be free of darkness. It is part of us, as night is part of the day. But so long as we stand together, as kin, as North, it will never conquer us." When he raised his cup and the hall roared back. The North remembers. The brothers and sisters of House Stark sat beneath the banners of their house, the direwolves sleeping at their feet, the memory of war giving way to hope. Outside, the grass grew. The apple trees flowered, the old stones warmed in the sun. For a little while, peace held. For a little while, the wolves of Winterfell were home. Aika. Summer's breath finally reached the north. It came subtly at first, the river ice thinning, then shattering, birds darting across clear blue skies, the faint scent of apple blossoms drifting in through Winterfell's open gates. The snowdrifts retreated further with each week, and sunlight slanted into the old castle's courtyards, turning the blackened scars of siege and fire to soft green moss. The world was changed, yet in these days of rare peace, it sometimes seemed the old stories had never happened. Jon walked the fields beyond the walls in the evening, the grass up to his knees, the wind tugging at his cloak. Children ran between the furrows, wildlings and Northmen together, chasing dogs and flinging clods of earth, voices ringing with laughter. Farmers hailed him from the distance, and he stopped to speak with them, offering a hand with a stubborn gait or a few words of advice on ailing sheep. They called him "My Lord," sometimes Wolf King, but he saw only gratitude in their faces. No awe, no fear, just honest trust born of shared survival. At home, Sansa ruled with deft care. She met with the city's women each morning, planning the season's markets and matching orphans with new families. She and Samwell Tarly pored over letters and inventories, seeing to every detail from grain taxes to schoolrooms. The old keep echoed with voices at all hours. It seemed for the first time in living memory, every soul in Winterfell was busy building, not just surviving. Robb returned from the wilds with spring's first caravans, his hair sun-bleached, skin darkened, the wariness in his face softened by days on the open road. He rode into the courtyard with a company of hill clansmen and free folk, his saddle piled high with furs and cheeses and wildflowers. Laughter on his lips as he tossed a white fox pelt to Arya. She caught it with a grin, her own cheeks sunburned from weeks spent patrolling the rivers and forests. Her boots caked in mud, Nymeria at her heel. Arya was often gone for days, but she always returned before moonrise, sometimes with news of poachers or lost children, sometimes with nothing but the wild joy of motion in her stride. After Robb's return, the siblings gathered in the Godswood, the day warm and bright, the grass starred with violets. Jon came late, brushing flour from his hands, having spent the afternoon in the kitchens trading stories with old Nan and the baker's apprentices. He found Sansa reading aloud from a battered volume of Northern history, Arya flat on her stomach in the sun, Robb whittling a whistle from a willow branch. Sansa paused as Jon arrived, closing the book and fixing him with a wry smile. "If you want any bread, you'd better eat before the boys do." Robb grinned, tossing the whistle to Arya, who caught it one-handed. "We've had enough hard crusts on the road. The kitchens here are better than any feast in the south." Jon eased down beside them, Ghost settling at his side. "When was the last time any of us just sat?" Sansa tilted her head. "We used to do this all the time, before." Her voice trailed off, but the shadow passed quickly. "Now we can again, for a little while." Arya piped on the whistle, making Nymeria's ears twitch, and Jon couldn't help but laugh. The sound was strange in his throat. So rare had laughter become, but it felt right, and the others joined him, sunlight shimmering in the spaces between. They talked for hours, of crops and horse races, of summer fairs to come, of plans for the growing school in the keep, of rumors of strange new foods arriving from Dorne and the Isles. Arya wanted to ride west, to the edge of the world. Sansa dreamed of turning Winterfell into a true city, a place where learning and music and laughter could thrive. Robb, content, seemed happy simply to be there, the last of his old sorrow melting beneath the warmth of kin and home. When dusk fell, Jon lingered, running his fingers through the grass, watching as fireflies kindled in the shade of the heart tree. "Do you ever think it's a dream?" he asked quietly, and the others turned to listen. "Sometimes," Arya said, "but even dreams end. So I run while I can." Sansa rested her head against Jon's shoulder, her voice soft. "We paid enough for it. This piece is ours." Robb's smile was rueful, full of memory. "Aye. And if the world tries to take it again, it'll have to come through all of us." Mendasiri. Teatr. Word of peace in the north spread like honey on warm bread. Caravans from White Harbor brought glass and silk. Ironborn longships arrived with fish and wool, the captains bowing their heads at the gate. A handful of southern knights asked leave to join the watch, and Gendry's forges rang from dawn to dusk, making tools and plows as much as swords. Children born in the siege took their first steps beneath banners of wolf and trout and bear. Wildling clans settled on land gifted by the Starks, their traditions braided into the North Zone, bonfires on the solstice, oaths sworn by the old gods, new songs sung in the long hall. The small folk prospered, even as they kept a wary eye on the hills for the shadows of old enemies. Sansa's court became the heart of the new North. She ruled with a patience that surprised even her, granting clemency where she could, justice where she must. Petyr Baelish was quietly exiled to the Fingers, never to return. Lord Manderley presided over the city's courts. Lady Mormont trained girls and boys in arms and reading alike. Emel's school filled with children of every birth. Arya slipping in sometimes to teach the art of moving unseen, or to listen at the window while others recited histories. Robb wandered further each season, always returning with tales of lost villages reclaimed, of new harvests, of free folk weddings and births. He became a symbol more than a lord. Children followed him from field to field. Women offered bread and salt. Men greeted him as if he were their own son. Sometimes at night, when the moon was bright, he'd sit atop Winterfell's highest tower with Jon, watching the forests and rivers, silent together until dawn. Arya remained restless. She took to guiding caravans, leading bands of orphans on wild explorations of the ruins and woods, teaching them to track and hide, to run and to dream. On her rare nights at home, she told stories that made even the battle-hardened guards shiver, and always she ended with a smile. "There's more world to see, but this is home." Ma'am. Jon, for his part, drifted between tasks, settling disputes, patrolling the fields, teaching at Sam's school, writing letters to King's Landing and the Reach and the Isle. He met with wildling elders, sharing mead and stories by the fire, always listening more than he spoke. When the lords pressed him to take a title, to rule outright, he demurred. The North is strong because we remember, not because of crowns. One day, news came from the south. Aegon and Daenerys, now married, had named a daughter, and the realm rejoiced. The Raven carried word of trade and festivals, of new laws and pardons. Sansa read the letter aloud in the great hall, her voice clear, the faces of her people full of cautious hope. The old world was truly gone, and something fragile and promising had taken root in its place. There were shadows still, pirates in the far western seas, a failed rebellion in the Vale, rumors of unrest among the Ironborn. But they seemed distant, unable to darken the heart of the North. One starlit night, John found himself in the Godswood, watching the ripples on the pool beneath the heart tree. Sansa joined him, wrapping a cloak about his shoulders. "You never ask for much," she said quietly. "You could have had anything." He shrugged, smiling a little. "What I want, I have. Family. Home. A North at peace." She rested her head on his arm, as she had as a child. "We couldn't have done it without you, without Robb, without all of us." He looked at the tree, the old scars in the wood, the new leaves. "It's not just us. It's everyone who fought, everyone who forgave, everyone who tried." Sansa nodded. "Then let's keep trying. Every day." "Mayu?" He looked down at her, pride and love mingling in his chest. "Every day." Summer deepened. The fields turned gold, the orchards heavy with fruit, the riverbanks bursting with wildflowers. Feasts spilled out into the courtyards, music rising under the stars. Children grew tall, learned to fight and to read and to hope. Arya rode west at last, promising to return before winter's first frost. Robb traveled the hill country, teaching boys to track deer and girls to wield a bow. Sansa ruled with steady wisdom, her council united, her city safe. Samwell's library overflowed, and the story of the Long Night and the wolves who saved the world became a tale mothers whispered to babies in their cradles. And Jon walked the lands, ghost beside him, at peace in a world he'd never dared dream could last. He watched the North change, watched it hold true to itself, watched it grow brighter and braver and kinder. He missed those he'd lost, but carried them in memory. In the heart tree's shade, he thanked the old gods and the new for a life hard won, and a dawn that was finally, fully theirs. The North remembered. The North endured. And under summer's endless sky, the wolves of Winterfell, brother, sister, friend, kept watch for all the seasons still to come. Kya, Gei. A warm wind danced through the broken towers of Winterfell, rippling banners on the walls, and carrying with it the scent of growing things. Fresh earth, apple blossom, wild mint crushed beneath boot and paw. Jon Snow stood on the parapets, hands folded, eyes tracing the horizon where sunlight slanted over field and forest. The world below him shimmered in the promise of another day, and though the scars of battle remained, charred stones, fields still being tilled back to green, there was an undeniable sense of awakening. Every sound, from the soft clang of hammers in the forges to the distant laughter in the yard, felt threaded with hope. He watched Arya teaching the youngest children how to balance on the wall's lower ledge, her voice quick and encouraging. Nymeria curled in the grass like a silver shadow. Nearby, Gendry worked with apprentices at the forge, his hammer rising and falling in rhythm with the birdsong. Robb, a towering figure in a pale shirt, rode at the head of a small group of riders along the river path. Returning from another round of village visits, wildlings and Northmen at his side, their voices easy with the camaraderie of shared work. Sansa passed below him, her red hair catching the morning light, skirts brushing clean flagstones. She paused to offer a word to the women tending the new garden beds, laughing at a small mishap with a stubborn trowel. Then moving on, her presence grounding as the old keep itself. From above, Jon saw in her carriage the easy command of one who had faced storms and chosen to build rather than merely endure. The world seemed to turn slower, softer these days, as if the North itself were pausing to remember what it was to thrive. Later, Jon met with the council in the Solar, where sunlight spilled across long maps and sheaves of parchment. Sansa presided, Samwell at her left with neat stacks of ledgers and letters, Robb and Lord Manderley sharing a fresh loaf of rye, Lady Lyanna Mormont seated with the fierce patience of her house. The talk was of ordinary things, repairing roads washed out by spring's floods, ensuring the last of the widowed and orphaned had homes before the next cold. debating whether the new school should have lessons in navigation and trade. There was mention of the Ironborn's sudden interest in sheep and saltfish, rather than writing, of messages from Old Town offering healers and seeds, of plans to extend the market square. Even disputes felt smaller, more manageable, less desperate. Robb leaned in, arms folded, a smile tugging at his mouth as Sansa cut through a debate between Glover and Reed over pasture land. She's fiercer than Mother ever was in council. Sansa only raised her eyebrow. Because I learned from the best, and you lot are easier than lords and sellswords at King's Landing. She looked at Jon. Are we agreed then, on the free folks' claim to the eastern meadows? Jon nodded. Aye. They've tended it since the snows receded. If they share the lambing with the holdfast, it's a boon for both. Lyanna Mormont gave her curt approval, and Samwell made a careful note. We should record these things, he murmured. The realm could learn from the north. Sansa smiled at him, and the council moved on. Grain stores, apprenticeships, the best way to deal with a wolf pup found in the kitchens. When they rose, it was with the feeling of work accomplished, not battles merely survived. Jon found Arya in the stables that afternoon, brushing down her bay mare, the air thick with the scents of hay and leather. She looked up at his approach, eyes bright. Thinking of riding west? He asked. Maybe. Arya's grin was feral. There's always something new beyond the next ridge, but I like it here for now. He nodded, running a hand along the horse's neck. The children look up to you. She shrugged. They listen better than grown men. Besides, who else will teach them to climb walls? He laughed, and Arya's gaze softened. You look lighter, Jon. Like the world's let you breathe again. Dapperly man. I think I have, he said, surprised to realize it was true. We all have, in our own way. A quiet moment passed. Arya glanced out the door at the bustling yard. Do you miss it? The fighting? The danger? He shook his head. Not the killing. But there are days I miss the clarity of purpose. The sense that what we did mattered. Arya looked at him sidelong. It still matters. Every small thing, every kindness, every day we hold the peace. Maybe more than war ever did. Nemdor and all. That evening, Sansa invited the council and half the household to a feast under the stars. Long tables stretched beneath apple trees budding white and green, lanterns and ribbons swinging from the branches. The kitchens turned out loaves still warm from the ovens. Trout caught fresh from the river. Stews rich with barley and herbs, wild strawberries heaped in bowls. Ale and mead flowed, and the songs rose up, fierce and sweet and sad by turns. Robb sang with the hill folk, his deep voice threading through the harmonies. Sansa danced with children, her laughter as rich as the bells in the tower. Arya perched atop a fence, clapping in time, trading jokes with Gendry and the wildling boys. Samwell and Maester Walken debated history with Lord Manderley and the apprentices, their words punctuated by much eye-rolling from Lyanna. Jon sat with Ghost at his feet, watching, sometimes joining in, more often content simply to listen. The shadows cast by the lanterns flickered across faces, new and old, and Jon realized that for all the loss, Bran wandering the world, Rickon's empty chair, the ghosts of the crypt, there was also a fullness here he'd never dared imagine. Later, as the feast dwindled and the moon climbed high, Sansa drew Jon aside, leading him through the gardens, their footsteps silent on the dew-soaked grass. You look at peace, she said. You should allow yourself more of it. He smiled, shaking his head. It still feels borrowed sometimes, as if the old world will come crashing through the gate. Now they know where you come. Sansa touched his arm. Then let's build something new, so strong that no old shadow can break it. He looked at her, truly looked, and saw the strength she'd forged, the hope she carried. You already have. In the days that followed, the peace deepened. Messengers from the south brought word of a great council at King's Landing, a celebration of unity, invitations sent to every lord, lady, and notable of the realm. Sansa deliberated long with the council before deciding to send a small company, herself, Samwell, and Lord Manderley, with Arya slipping away to see old friends in the city's back alleys. John stayed in the north. He oversaw the last of the spring planting, walked the rivers where new bridges were rising, taught children in the castle yard how to ride and shoot. Robb rode west with the wildlings to broker a peace with a stubborn clan, leaving John in charge of the castle for the first time with no uncertainty in his stride. Summer festivals bloomed across the north, bonfires on the solstice, marriages beneath the heart tree, games and races on the new commons. Songs spread about the peace of the wolves, about a winter that ended not with the sword, but with the joined hands of kin. John found himself writing letters south more often than before, trading news and advice with Aegon and Daenerys, sending thanks for gifts of seed and silks, offering honest counsel on troubles that never quite left the world. He wrote to Sansa, to Arya, to Robb. Long letters sometimes, brief notes others, but always with warmth and the hope that had taken root in the North's stubborn soil. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the window, John climbed to the rookery to help Samwell tend to a stubborn hawk. They worked in companionable silence until Sam, never one to let things lie, spoke. "Do you ever wonder if peace can truly last, John?" John thought a long moment. "I think peace is made, Sam. Every day. Sometimes it's as simple as bread shared, sometimes as hard as forgiving an old enemy. There's no end to it, but that's the point, isn't it?" "Nemterwater." Sam smiled. "It is. I think I'll write that down." John laughed, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. Outside the thunder rolled and faded, and he watched the storm with a quiet heart. Robb returned at midsummer, triumphant and weary, having convinced the last stubborn holdouts to join the new order. He and John walked the walls at sunset, the shadows long and golden, the fields below them alive with growing things. "We did it, brother," Robb said, his voice low, full of wonder. "The North is whole." John clasped his shoulder, looking out over the land that I'd fought for. "It was never just us, Robb, but yes, we did." Below, Sansa's laughter drifted through an open window, Arya's distant voice chasing wildling children down the yard. Ghost and Nymeria watched from the shade, their red eyes bright, their fur sleek in the warm night. The world was not without shadows. There would be drought and storm, old fears and new threats. But for this season, for this summer, the wolves of Winterfell had claimed not only survival, but joy. John turned his face to the wind and breathed deep, the scent of apple blossom and rain and life filling his chest, his heart. And he let himself believe, if only for this day, that peace was a gift that could last. So long as those who cherished it stood guard, so long as the North remembered, so long as hope endured. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 940 on C50, 3B5K70, AID 713, Dine. Ka. A. The season turned, and the North grew lush beneath the long golden days. Fields once torn by war now waved with barley and rye. The sound of children's laughter replaced the clamor of swords, and the people of Winterfell rose each morning to the steady, hopeful pulse of a land reawakening. The walls of the castle, so often battered by siege and storm, now stood garlanded with wildflowers, trailing from windowsills and balconies, filling the air with sweetness. Jon Snow walked the battlements at dawn, pausing at the highest tower to survey the world that had so nearly been lost. Ghost padded beside him, tail brushing the stone, white fur gleaming pink in the sunrise. From this vantage, he could see the river winding silver through the meadows, the neat rows of new-planted orchards, the bustling town beyond the walls where Northmen and wildlings alike lived and worked side by side. He leaned on the parapet and watched as a wagon rolled through the southern gate, loaded with fruit and casks of cider for the market. Behind it trailed a party of travelers, merchants from Old Town, their banners fluttering, their carts laden with bolts of silk brass lampstands, bundles of rare books. Jon smiled, thinking how once such strangers would have been met with suspicion and drawn swords. Now, the guards greeted them with easy banter, and the townsfolk crowded close, eager for new tales. Robb joined him at the wall's edge, hair ruffled by the wind, eyes bright from the morning ride. He wore a plain shirt and breeches, his sword sheathed and dusty with pollen from the wilds. He carried the look of a man who had found peace at last, but the strength of the old wolf still lingered in every line of his posture. "They bring news from the Reach," Robb said, nodding to the merchants. "Trade's up. The Mander runs clear, the river barges full as I've ever seen them. Lord Manderley will be pleased." John grinned. "As long as he gets his cut." Robb leaned against the parapet, looking out over the fields. "I never thought to see a summer like this. Not after everything. Not after, well, I suppose the world needed a new story." John's voice softened. "Rewriting it, Robb. Every day." Robb turned, his smile crooked. "And Sansa's pen is the sharpest of all." The great hall was alive with the colors and music of the festival. Banners of Stark, Mormont, Reed, Glover, and all the allied houses hung side by side, fresh, woven, and brilliant. The air hummed with song and the clatter of plates. The scent of roast meats, pies, sweet cakes, and honeyed apples mingled with the spice of wild mint. Sansa presided at the high table, her hair woven with summer flowers, her eyes as clear and watchful as the sky. She welcomed every guest by name. A delegation from Dorne bringing citrus and silk scarves. A shipwright from White Harbor with news of a new fleet. Wildling elders who bowed stiffly, then presented Sansa with a carved wolf totem. She responded to each with warmth, her words binding all to Winterfell's peace. Samwell Tarly arrived in the afternoon with a train of scholars, their robes dusted with pollen, scrolls strapped to every saddle. He greeted Jon and Robb with a fierce hug, then promptly disappeared into the solar with Sansa and Maester Wolkan to debate the merits of a new system of schools and a festival of learning to rival the South's grandest tournaments. Arya appeared in the late light, returning from a journey to the coast. She moved through the hall with her old quicksilver grace, leaving gifts and stories in her wake. A silver comb for Sansa, a bone whistle for the children, a tale of sea wolves hunting off the Skagos shore for Robb. She told of laughter among the fishermen, of wild dances by moonlight, of seeing the world reborn. That night, as torches flared, and the moon rose full, the whole of Winterfell spilled into the godswood. Music rose beneath the red leaves. Children leapt in the grass, women and men danced barefoot, the fire crackled high. Jon watched as Arya spun with the wildlings. Sansa sang with the fisherfolk, Robb drank and told stories by the largest fire, the direwolves lying in the shadows. Ghost Nymeria, and a new litter of pups tussling by the roots of the heart tree. Jon felt the pull of old ghosts, the ache of what had been lost, but he let the pain move through him like the wind. There was room for joy in the north now, a space that sorrow no longer claimed alone. When the festival ended, work resumed. Summer was brief in the north. Each day was precious. Sansa walked the fields, overseeing the building of a new hall for travelers, and the planting of orchards. She met often with the council, her words shaping not only law but the spirit of the realm. "Let the north be the hearth of Westeros," she said once, and her council repeated it until it became their charge. Robb rode south to treat with lords at the Neck, and to the east to visit villages where wildling and Northman lived in peace. He returned with news of a child born with hair as red as fire and eyes as bright as new leaves. Proof, he said, that the old blood and the new could mingle and flourish. Arya taught a new band of young scouts to read the signs of the forest and the sky. She led them on journeys into the hills, teaching them not just to track but to return, to map, to survive. The children adored her, calling her the wolf who runs alone, but Arya only laughed and ran with them. Jon met with Samwell each week in the solar, helping oversee the new schools, reading letters from King's Landing and beyond. News from the south was mostly good. Aegon and Daenerys' rule was steady, with a few small rebellions swiftly resolved. Dorne flourished, the Riverlands recovered, the Iron Islands grew rich from honest trade. Here and there old hatreds flared, but never for long. Jon wrote back with encouragement and advice, sending word of the North's progress and its small joys. In the cool of the evening, Jon sometimes walked the Godswood with Ghost, letting his mind settle. Sometimes Sansa joined him, speaking of the past and the future in the hush beneath the red leaves. Sometimes Arya returned from the wilds, or Robb from his journeys. and the four would gather together, their voices mingling with the sigh of the wind. Autumn threatened in the air by midsummer's end. The first leaves blushed gold on the apple trees, and the nights grew cool enough for cloaks and fires. Sansa convened a council for one last session before the harvest. "We've come further than I ever dreamed," she said as she looked out across the gathered lords, wildlings, and counselors. "But the work is never done. This peace was made by all of us, and it will last only if we keep building strong homes, strong bonds, strong hearts." Robb stood. "We know the cost of division. Let no one, no old grudge, no false promise, ever turn us against one another again." "None?" Arya grinned at her siblings. "And if trouble comes, we'll meet it together. Like wolves." Jon found himself smiling. "That's what the North remembers. Not just the cold or the hardship, but how we endure, together." The council agreed on the season's plans, repairing the last flood-damaged bridges, sharing surplus grain with the struggling riverlands, sending a small company to treat with the Vale. They promised to expand Samwell's new school, to invite teachers from the Citadel, to hold another festival before the snows. That night, Jon sat on the roof above the Great Hall, looking down at Winterfell, its towers lit with lanterns, the air alive with the hum of music and laughter. Ghost curled beside him, warm and solid. He thought of Bran, distant and strange in his wanderings, of Rickon, lost too soon, of Ned and Catelyn, their memory a quiet strength beneath every stone. He closed his eyes and listened, not for the clamor of war or the whisper of the dead, but for the sound of life in the home he'd never dared believe could last. The days shortened, the fields ripened, the air grew sweet with the promise of harvest. One afternoon, Jon joined Robb and Arya at the edge of the new orchard, watching children pick apples for the festival. Sansa arrived with Samwell and Gendry, baskets in hand, laughter in their voices. They worked side by side, filling baskets and telling stories, the sun warm on their backs. Later, they picnicked in the shade, eating bread and cheese, berries and apples. Arya ran races with the youngest. Robb taught a boy to carve a whistle. Sansa braided a garland of late-blooming wildflowers for her hair. When dusk came, they walked back through the fields, arm in arm, the wolves following. Jon felt the weight of years fall away, leaving only the truth that mattered. The North endured, and so did the love that bound its scattered, stubborn children. As the first stars pricked the sky, Jon looked at his siblings, at his home, and knew at last what peace could be. A promise renewed each day, as long as memory and hope remained. The story of the wolves of Winterfell was not of war, but of the hard, bright joy of what came after. And the North, at last, was home. King K. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 940 on the seat for CT3. BD 714, Bine. Gagni. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 940 on NAC 9030 on 6 735 SJC. BK. By the time the first true chill of autumn swept down from the Frostfangs, Winterfell had become a city of song and story. In the long evenings, torches lit every court and alley, and the smell of wood smoke, roasting chestnuts, and cider filled the crisp air. Children tumbled through the grass outside the walls, wildlings and Northmen, indistinguishable, but for the accents in their shouts. The fields had been gathered, the granaries filled, enough, Sansa declared, to see them through 3 winters if need be. The town had grown in a way no one living remembered. New stone houses on the south road, wooden huts clustering around the market, a new inn for travelers and traders that drew laughter and music even on the coldest nights. Jon Snow sat with Robb beneath a heart tree, its leaves crimson as blood and just beginning to fall. Their cloaks were thick, boots muddy from a morning ride to the river to check on the latest bridge construction. And Ghost slept at Jon's feet, occasionally twitching in a dream. For a long time, neither brother spoke, content with the quiet. The distant clang of Gendry's hammer and the shriek of happy children carried on the breeze. Robb tossed an apple core into the grass, watching a pair of sparrows flit through the branches. Remember when we were boys? We thought the world would never change. Winterfell was all we knew, and every adventure was just a ride to the village or a day in the woods. Jon smiled, the ache of memory sweet. We dreamed of seeing the world. I remember how you used to draw maps, every corner of Westeros, every imagined island off the edge of the world. Robb nudged him. And you wanted to ride with the Night's Watch, be a hero at the wall. Jon shook his head. I wanted to belong somewhere. We all did. Robb's gaze grew distant. You do now, Jon. We all do. A flock of crows scattered from the field beyond, and Arya appeared through the brush, cheeks flushed from running. Nymeria and her half-grown pups bounded at her heels, their pelts already thick for the coming cold. You two look as old as Maester Luwin, Arya teased, dropping beside them, stretching out with a groan. There's a troop of little ones by the river. I taught them how to walk a rope over the water. She grinned, wild and full of pride. Half fell in, but they learned. Jon laughed. You'll turn them all into wolves before winter. Arya plucked a leaf from the grass, tucking it behind her ear. Let them. Wolves survive. That's what Father always said. Robb looked up at the sky, where geese were flying south in a wavering line. Mother would have liked this. She used to say autumn was her favorite, full of endings, but every ending a beginning too. Neither. A comfortable silence fell, the three siblings together beneath the red leaves, the world quiet around them. Sansa presided over the harvest feast that night in the great hall, which glowed with candlelight and good cheer. Tables groaned beneath platters of roast duck, trout and lemon, honeyed carrots, and loaves still steaming from the ovens. Musicians from White Harbor played lively reels. Wildling fiddlers answered with their own quick tunes. Banners hung from the rafters, every color of the New North, and the walls themselves seemed to pulse with warmth. She raised a cup, her voice ringing clear above the hubbub. To those we lost, and to all we have built together, let the North be the heart of hope for all the realm. A cheer went up, and cups clinked. Gendry, cheeks red with mead, toasted the new forges. Lord Manderly praised the first shipment of eels to brave us. Even the wildling chieftains raised their voices in a ragged song. Samwell, his hands ink-stained from copying old books into new shared tales of distant libraries, prompting laughter and a promise from Sansa to build a new wing for learning beside the old Godswood. The children, many of them orphans of war now fostered by Northmen and free folk, raced beneath the tables, pausing only to snatch extra sweets from platters, or to listen wide-eyed as Arya told them stories of shadow cats and mermaids, and a city made entirely of glass. Jon ate little, but drank deeply, his heart full as he watched his family. Sansa radiant at the head of the hall, Robb booming laughter with the Mormonts and Glover, Arya a flicker of wildness wherever joy was brightest. Even Bran was present, if only in memory. Sansa had had a statue raised in the crypts, a simple thing but carved with care, the weirwood face gentle and strange. After the feast, Jon wandered the castle with Ghost, stopping at the new hall that housed the children and the old, their snores and soft murmurings a sign of comfort Jon had never known in his own childhood. He found Gendry and Sam talking beside a rain barrel, discussing plans for a water wheel to grind flour. He sat for a time beneath the heart tree, watching stars bloom above the branches, and listened to the wind rustle the leaves. Soft, peaceful, nothing of the long night's terror remaining. Autumn thickened, and with it came new arrivals. A delegation from the Vale, merchants from Sunspear, even a wary knight from the Westerlands seeking work and welcome. Sansa greeted them all, her counsel ever at her side, her word law throughout the keep and beyond. One afternoon as she walked the town with Jon, they paused beside the blacksmith shop where Arya and a half-dozen children were learning to fit arrowheads. Sansa watched her little sister with quiet pride. She was always the wildest, Sansa said. But she's found her place, I think. Jon smiled. We all have, thanks to you. She shook her head, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. Not just me. This is a home we made together. Every one of us who stayed, who fought, who forgave. They walked on, discussing the harvest, the coming winter, the rumor of a southern bard writing a song about the wolves of Winterfell. Sansa's laughter rang out, honest and free. Let them sing, let them all come and see. Robb rode out often with the harvesters, helping load wagons and sharing ale by the fires. He visited every village, every hill fort, listening to the people's hopes and troubles, always returning to Winterfell with a gift. A carved spoon from a grateful widow, a cap knitted by a farmer's wife, a jar of honey from children who called him Uncle Robb. He spent long hours in council, but more in the fields, his presence a reassurance stronger than any gold. Arya was gone for days at a time, scouting the edges of the woods, mapping the wolf packs and warning poachers to keep the peace. Sometimes she returned with stories of a bear in the high meadows or new free folk settlements deep in the forest. She never stayed in one place long, but whenever she came home, she brought laughter and a wild spark that brightened every room. Jon, too, became a part of the land's rhythm. He judged disputes, rode with the rangers along the wall's ruins, taught the children to shoot and ride, and keep faith with their friends. His name traveled south and east, a legend growing in the telling. A king who wanted no crown, only peace for his people. Sam's school opened its doors with the first snows. Children streaming through halls lined with books and maps. Teachers from the citadel and beyond sharing wisdom, new and old. Sansa sat in on lessons sometimes, her own hunger for knowledge never sated. The town grew busy around the school, and in the evenings the bells rang out, calling all to supper, to song, to stories. One night, as frost dusted the windows, Jon stood with Robb and Arya atop the gatehouse, looking out over the sleeping city. The sky was full of stars, a silver road stretching north and west. Robb was quiet, his voice rough with gratitude. "I've been many things, a king, a ghost, a brother. But this, tonight, is what I want to remember." Arya leaned into his shoulder, her hair wild in the breeze. "We earned it." Jon rested his hand on her back, steady as the stone beneath them. "Let's keep earning it, every day." They stayed until dawn, watching the light creep across the land. The land that was theirs by birth, by sacrifice, by the stubborn, shared will to survive. So the North entered another winter. There were hardships, as there always were. Storms that battered the coast, wolves in the hills, a fire that took 3 houses but spared every life. Yet, the people endured. They built, they laughed, they remembered. Children grew tall and strong, old grudges faded, new songs rose. The memory of the long night became story, not wound. And when travelers asked what changed the North, the people told them. It was not only swords or fire, not even the will of a king. It was the heart of Winterfell, beating on through every frost, every grief, every joy. The wolves ran free in the woods. The halls were full of light, and in the hearts of all who lived and loved beneath the red leaves, the promise was kept. The North remembers, and the North endures. Oh. The first snow of winter fell before sunrise, dusting Winterfell's rooftops with a hush so profound it softened even the clang of the blacksmith's hammer and the wild clamor of children's laughter in the bailey. Jon Snow woke to the sight of tiny flakes dancing past his window, catching in the lantern light, settling on the thick stone sill. He lay still for a long while, listening to ghosts' quiet breathing on the rushes by his bed, the distant creak of beams and banners shifting in the cold. Outside, the world was silvered, transformed. He rose and wrapped himself in a heavy cloak, running calloused fingers along the pommel of Longclaw before strapping it at his side out of habit, more ritual than readiness. The keep was warm, fires banked high in every hearth. The scent of bread and honey thick in the air. Jon nodded to servants and guards, exchanged easy words with Sam in the corridor. Sam already awake, arm full of books clutched tight, excitement in his eyes for the day's lessons in the new school. Down in the yard, the snow delighted the youngest. Arya dashed by with a pack of children, their shouts ringing as they hurled snowballs at wildling boys and girls, all pretense of sides gone in the game. Gendry ducked behind a barrel, laughing as Arya pegged him square in the chest, Nymeria and Ghost charging through the drifts, scattering children in every direction. John lingered a moment, remembering old snows, fearful days before battles, or haunted nights after, grateful that, for these children, winter's arrival meant only wonder and play. He crossed the yard to the godswood, where Robb knelt in quiet prayer beneath the red leaves. Robb's hair was dusted with white, but his eyes were bright as summer when he stood to greet John. "It's a good omen," Robb said, glancing skyward. "First snow before the last harvest means a mild winter, the old wives say." John snorted. "The old wives say a great many things, but I'll take hope where I can find it." Then went shower. They walked together beneath the branches, their boots silent in the moss and snow, the air smelling of earth and wood smoke. "Do you ever miss it?" Robb asked softly, after a time. "The fight? The certainty?" John thought of all the battles, castle walls, frozen rivers, the icy breath of whites, and the sharper bite of betrayal. He shook his head. "Not the war. Sometimes the purpose. But not the cost." Robb nodded. "You and Sansa. She's changed everything. I ride the roads, and there's laughter in the villages. No one looks at me as a ghost anymore, only as a man." "Meher?" "You are," John said. "Alive. All of us, somehow." They stood together in silence, the old gods looking on. Above them, the heart tree's red leaves trembled in a sudden breeze. The world felt fragile, but for the first time in memory, John did not brace himself for sorrow. The day's work was steady. Sansa called the council to the solar, her voice calm and her bearing unmistakably regal as she listened to reports and requests. An early shipment of oats from White Harbor, a complaint from the millers about the frozen wheel, a plan from Samwell and Gendry to build a new aqueduct using heated stones from the forges. Lord Manderley sent word that Braavos was ready to negotiate new trade in salt and herring. The Wildling clan sought permission to build a hall of their own within the town's new quarter, a place for meeting, feasts, and marriage, side by side with the Northmen's houses. Sansa nodded her approval, directing Gendry to help with the foundations. Arya breezed into the council, snow melting from her hair, eyes alight. "There's a trader from Old Town in the market. Says he's seen dragons off the western coast." Sansa's mouth twitched with amusement. "The last time, Arya, you said he'd seen a kraken with a crown." Arya grinned. "He also brought sweet figs, so I'm inclined to believe whatever he says." Samwell leaned in, excited. "If the dragons are breeding again, it means the world really is changing. Fire and ice, side by side." "Vanity." Robb laughed, and even Lady Mormont cracked a rare smile. The council adjourned with a sense of satisfaction. Their small world knit tighter for the day's work. That evening, the city's first true snowstorm set in. Fat flakes swirling down, muffling every sound, turning lanterns to soft blurs. The people of Winterfell gathered in the great hall, drawn by warmth and each other's company. Sansa presided at the high table, her hair braided with holly, her eyes aglow in the candlelight. Musicians played, wildlings teaching Northmen how to dance reels, children tumbling between benches. Robb told stories at the hearth, spinning tales of wolf packs in the haunted forest, of a bear with silver fur, of the time he'd traded his cloak to a fisherman for a kiss from the fisherman's daughter. Arya led a contest of knives, carving apples, not rivals, and delighting when the smallest wildling girl carved a perfect wolf's head. Samwell organized a game of riddles for the children, promising a honey cake to any who could best him. Sansa listened to news from every corner of the north, her heart lightened by the sense that, for the first time, there was enough to share. As the night wore on, John found himself at the window watching snow pile on the ledges, his heart strangely full. Ghost pressed close, warm and solid. Sansa joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Do you remember when we were young?" she murmured. "All those winters that felt endless?" John squeezed her fingers gently. "I remember. I used to think there would never be another spring." She smiled, tears bright in her eyes. "But there always was, and always will be now." "Nay." He looked at her. The woman she'd become, steady, wise, beloved, and marveled at how much had changed, how much remained. "This is your doing, Sansa. All of it. She shook her head. It was all of us. You, Robb, Arya, every child who came home, every stranger who was welcomed. The North is a family now, not just a land. They stood together, to keep alive behind them, the winter world at peace. As the weeks passed, snow deepened, but hardship never grew sharp. Stores were full. The sick healed in Sam's new infirmary, and the people met each trial together, digging out roads after storms, sharing wood when fuel grew low, mending roofs and walls in neighborly rotation. Children played on frozen ponds. Young lovers slipped away to secret corners in the old walls. Musicians wandered from house to house, carrying song wherever they went. Sansa organized classes for the girls in the long afternoons, teaching reading, numbers, the keeping of accounts. Arya taught boys and girls alike how to ride and shoot, to track a deer or mend a boot, to be quick in foot and mind. Robb and Gendry supervised the building of the Wildling Hall, and when it opened, half hewn from a fallen heart tree, half built of river stone, the entire town feasted beneath its eaves, laughing at the wildling jests, the Northmen's songs, the children's proud recitation of the tales of old. Jon helped oversee a patrol along the old walls line, making sure no bandits troubled the new settlements, lending a hand to the masons shoring up the last watchtower. He spoke with men from the hills and the far east, listened to old grievances, helped settle quarrels with patient, fair words. Where once he'd expected only cold and suspicion, he found trust. A trust he wore as lightly as his name, but which weighed more than any crown. By midwinter, Winterfell was radiant, a city agleam beneath a cold, bright sky. News from the south was good. King Aegon and Queen Daenerys had sent envoys, inviting Sansa and her council to King's Landing for a conclave on the future of the realm. Sansa read the message to the council, her voice measured. "I'll go, with Sam, Arya, and Lord Manderley. Jon, you stay. The North must always have a Stark." And Shara. Jon nodded. "I will hold fast. The realm needs your voice more than mine." The parting was bittersweet. Sansa embraced Jon, whispered a charge to watch over their people, pressed a ribbon into his palm. Red as the heart tree, a promise to return. Robb rode with the party as far as the neck, then doubled back, his absence already remarked upon by small folk, his laughter missed in the feast hall. Winter closed in, but hope was kindled in every hearth. Jon walked the walls each morning, watched the rivers freezing, the meadows blanketed in white. He welcomed travelers, judged disputes, played with the children in the yard. At night, he met Robb and Arya at the Heart Tree, sharing food and stories, keeping memory alive. When the winds howled and darkness pressed close, Jon would sit by the fire, ghost at his feet, writing letters by candlelight, reports for Sansa, tales for Samwell's school, quiet reassurances for the king and queen in the south. He wrote not of war, but of peace. The slow, patient labor of building a home, the joy of small kindnesses, the laughter that survived every frost. He wrote of the North as it was now, no longer a land of endless suffering, but a hearth for all who braved the long night and endured. He wrote of the promise that bound his family, his people, to this place. A promise kept not by crowns or blades, but by the stubborn everyday love of those who remembered. As the days slowly turned and the snows began to thaw, word reached Winterfell. Sansa would soon return, and with her, the promise of new days, new bonds, new stories. Jon stood on the walls with Robb and Arya, watching the sun rise over the land they'd fought so hard to save. He thought of Ned and Catelyn, of Bran and Rickon, of every ghost who had walked these stones before. He thought of the wolves that ran still in the wild woods, of the children born since the peace, of the endless turning of the seasons. And he knew, with a certainty that went deeper than any fear, that whatever storms might come, the North would endure, the North would remember. For as long as there were wolves in Winterfell, as long as laughter echoed in the halls and bread was broken at the table, as long as love was stronger than grief, the long night would never return. Jon Snow smiled as the first sunlight struck the heart tree's red leaves. Home. Kapow. Spring's promise lingered at the edge of the snow, softening the hard outlines of Winterfell's towers and gilding the ice-sheathed rivers with a sheen of light. The drifts began to shrink, revealing the black, stubborn earth beneath. In the town, people gathered in doorways to greet the sun, their laughter rolling like the bells that tolled the passing of each hour. The worst of winter was done. Jon Snow stood atop the outer wall in the early light, Ghost pressed close against his side. He breathed in air still sharp with frost, but scented now with wood smoke and melting hay. Below him, the bailey thrummed with new energy. Farmers led teams of oxen to break ground in the thawed fields. Wildlings and Northmen together mended fences and dug new irrigation ditches. Merchants from Old Town and Bravos unpacked crates of grain, honey, and bolts of southern cloth. The market was a chaos of color, the language of trade blending with the softer music of home. He watched as Robb arrived from the North Road, mud splattered on his boots, cheeks red with cold. His laughter preceded him, a deep, welcoming sound that made men's heads turn. Arya loped after him, hair windblown and cheeks smudged with dirt, 3 wolf pups bounding at her heels. Robb greeted the guards with a joke, clapped hands with the blacksmith, and stopped to toss one of Arya's little wolves into the air, to the shrieking delight of the children who chased after. Jon's heart swelled with the sight. He could feel it in his bones. How peace had become a habit here, how the old wounds were nearly healed. He climbed down, his boots finding every familiar stone. He passed the kitchens, already rich with the scent of baking oatcakes, and paused as a pair of children ran up, a wildling boy and Northman girl, arguing about who could run fastest to the new orchard. "Take Arya with you," Jon said, ruffling their hair. "She'll give you a fair race and teach you how not to fall." They laughed and darted away, and Jon shook his head, smiling. In the council chamber, Sansa sat at the head of the long table, the light from the tall windows turning her red hair to fire. Samwell sat at her right, reading over a ledger, while Gendry and Lord Manderly discussed plans for a new windmill and a bathhouse for the town's women. Lyanna Mormont was present too, stern as ever, but with the ghost of a smile as she listened to Arya's stories about the wolf pups' latest mischief. The council was at ease, but the matters before them were not without weight. Reports from the far north told of new settlements founded by free folk, thriving even through the coldest nights. Sansa read a letter from the southern coast. Trade from Dorne was steady, and a small fleet of ships had arrived in White Harbor with oranges, lemons, and barrels of wine. Robb strode in, snow still melting on his shoulders. The last of the roads are clear. The pass is open all the way to Deepwood Moat. The wildlings at the lakes have built a bridge. They want a smith sent to check its strength. Gendry agreed to go himself, already making a list of iron and timber. Sam added, "The first lambs have been born at the Glover steading, and there's news from King's Landing. The Queen and King's child was born, a boy. They've named him Aemon." "Now, Sansa nodded approval. "Send our good wishes and a cask of Manderly's best. Let them remember that the North stands with the realm, not just apart from it." Arya leaned back in her chair, stretching her legs. "What about the festival? The children have been practicing their dances. Old Nan says it's bad luck if we skip the welcoming fires." Sansa's eyes sparkled. "Then we shall have fires enough to light all the North." Preparations for the spring festival began in earnest. Banners were dusted off and strung along every street. Carpenters raised platforms for music and dancing in the market square. Old, battered drums were brought out from storage, tuned and beaten into rhythm by children with red faces and eager hands. The cooks planned for days, promising stews of venison, loaves sweet with dried berries, tarts filled with thick cream, honey cakes shaped like wolves and fish. Arya led the children in rehearsal, teaching them steps from both free folk and Northmen's dances, sometimes improvising wild new moves that set the older folk laughing. Samwell set up a tent for the sharing of stories and songs. He would read from the old tales, and anyone, child or adult, could stand and offer a memory or a joke or a wish for the year ahead. Robb rode out to invite the distant villages and hamlets. He returned with farmers, woodsmen, even a group of miners from the hills, their faces still streaked with soot A few iron-born traders arrived, wary but welcome, bearing salted cod and intricate iron jewelry. A merchant caravan from Bravos brought singers and tumblers and a puppet play about the Night King, so garbled and silly that even the sternest Mormont could not keep a straight face. On the evening before the festival, Sansa walked the halls with Jon, her hand in the crook of his arm. "You never did like crowds," she teased. Jon smiled, letting his guard drop. "Like them now. Or maybe I like what they mean. Diz." He gestured to the laughter and light spilling from every doorway. "It's worth every battle we ever fought." They paused by the heart tree, where Robb sat whittling a whistle for one of Arya's orphans, and Arya herself perched overhead, watching the first stars blink into the sky. Sansa looked at her brothers and sister, her eyes shining. "We're together. That's all I ever wanted." Jon squeezed her hand. "And all we ever needed." The day of the festival dawned bright and cloudless. The snow melted in the sun, leaving the town awash in puddles and mud, but no one cared. There were races around the walls, music on every corner, a great feast laid on trestle tables in the yard. Wildling and Northman, merchant and child, all mingled as one people. Jon presided over the opening, with Robb at his right and Arya at his left. Sansa welcomed the guests, her voice ringing clear, her words threaded with warmth and hope. Robb led the first dance, spinning Sansa through the crowd as the musicians struck up a lively tune. Arya twirled children and wildlings alike, leaping and howling in wolfish joy. Jon joined the line with Ghost at his heel, and for the first time in his life he felt utterly, entirely home. That night, as the fires burned down and people gathered in circles for stories, Samwell rose and told of the long night, of the battle for Winterfell, of the return of the wolves. The children listened wide-eyed, then cheered as Arya finished the tale with a flourish and a jest. Old Nan told of the days before the dragons, and even the Braavosi puppeteers listened and chanted. When the last embers faded, Sansa led her family into the Godswood. They knelt beneath the heart tree, the red leaves whispering in the spring breeze. Each one spoke a wish. Arya for adventure, Robb for strength, Sansa for wisdom, Jon for the North's peace to endure. Afterwards, they lingered beneath the branches, the quiet broken only by the calls of night birds. Arya curled up with Nymeria and the pups. Robb stretched out in the grass, his head pillowed on his hands. Sansa and Jon sat side by side, shoulders touching. "You think it will last?" Sansa asked, voice soft as the wind. Jon looked at his family, his home, the land that had been reborn from darkness. "If we keep fighting for it. If we keep remembering, yes." Sansa smiled, her hair bright as flame in the moonlight. "Then let's keep remembering." The heart tree shivered, the stars wheeled overhead, and the night was gentle as a mother's hand. In the days that followed, the peace held. Wildlings planted gardens. Northmen learned songs from the southern bards. The town grew richer, not only in grain and gold, but in kindness. Every day, a new story, a new joy, a new hope. The scars of winter faded, replaced by the promise of all that could be made together. Jon stood on the walls at dusk, watching the world turn green again. Sansa read letters by lantern light. Dr. Robb rode out with the first scouts, teaching the youngest to follow trails. Arya chased her wolves through the woods, laughter bright in the still evening air. The North remembered, and the North endured. And beneath the red leaves of the heart tree, another year's story began, spun from love and loss, and the stubborn shining promise of home.